WBEN HD1, Burlington, Philadelphia. A Beasley Media Group station. Broadcasting live from the Comcast Business Studios. Powering possibilities. 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com. Now, Andrew Salchunas. 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
What's up, everybody? I'm Ray Dunn, not Andrew Salchunas. Still in for Andrew here on the Midday Show. As again, he gets a nice vacation this week, and he will be back with you next week. And a chance to relax, and now you get a chance for 4 hours with myself and, of course, Tom Alvord as we continue to take you through the Midday Show so far this week. And we got plenty to get into. There's a little bit of looking ahead to the Sixers team, looking, of course, the Eagles offseason. But yesterday, we heard from Dave Dombrowski. And that's where I want to start this today. And you know, if you've been listening at all, that I've been fired up for some baseball. A little too fired up, I would argue. I think I left yesterday like, wow, I think I might have been a little too jazzed up about getting into baseball season. But you get to hear from Dave Dombrowski literally like moments after our show ended yesterday, the first segment of the best show ever. And I love the reaction to the presser from Tyrone and Ricky of like, that's it? That's all we got? It was interesting to hear Dombrowski speak. A lot on Whit Merrifield. A lot. So much. Almost too much on Whit Merrifield. But there is one thing that sticks out, and it's where we're going to begin the conversation today with myself, of course, Tom, and all of you on the phones at 610-632-0975. Dave Dombrowski was asked, at this point in the offseason, and, you know, you're basically, you know, you're back. It's spring training. First full squad workout was yesterday, but the four free agents that we've referenced a number of times. I saw today the Athletic put out a story. They're calling them the Boris Four. The four remaining free agents, two of them being the starters that we've talked about a lot, Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery. They're still out there. So the question, of course, was posed of, are you done? Have you wrapped up your off season, and are you actively looking to make any improvements to this roster? Take a listen to what Dave Dombrowski had to say.
We like our club. I think our positional players are really set. I don't know who, if we're healthy when we break camp and Rojas makes the club, 12 of our 13 spots are spoken for at this point. So there's a battle for one more, and we have a lot of different people that can play that role. Our 5 starting pitchers are set. We have helped the depth of our starting pitching with a lot of moves that we're making. And our bullpen, we like our bullpen too at this time, and we see some of the arms that we like. So again, we'll be open-minded. We'll see what happens, but I can't say that we're actively looking to say we want to add this particular thing.
Now, if something falls into his lap, I'm sure that we're going to have a different conversation. But it seems, at least on the surface, and for the conversation that he's having with the reporters there, that they pretty much have wrapped up business that they are actively pursuing. Again, it's worth mentioning the relationship Boris seems to have with the Phillies and the fact that a lot of the top free agents are still Boris clients. But we take Dombrowski at the word there and say they're not actively looking to improve. They like the roster they have. They like the club they have. It raises the question. We are now fully into spring training. Everyone's there. Everyone's getting ready to go. Did this team do enough in the offseason? Did they do enough to take a team that was a game shy of winning back-to-back pennants? And did they do enough to put themselves right back where they were a season ago, where they were 2 seasons ago? One on the doorstep of a pennant, one on the doorstep of a World Series. Because that, to me, was the ultimate goal of this offseason. It was find a way back into it, obviously. And I think, you know, the report coming out of spring training, I think it was John Clark saying that, you know, Middleton gave the speech of go get me my, I'm not going to say it because I want to keep my job trophy back. You know, I think that mentality has obviously dominated this organization. But have they done enough to really go get that trophy back? And that's where I want to open up this question for you at 610-632-0975. Because when you look at this offseason as a whole, it's a very much run it back mentality of what they did. They re-signed Aaron Nola. You know, that was what they pretty much the prize of their offseason. And I know for a lot of you, that's not a prize. That's a curse. You are upset that you have to deal with Aaron Nola for longer. I don't know why. I don't know why you feel that way, but you feel that way for some reason. But now looking at this roster and the way it's constructed, Whit Merrifield now with the club, it seems like they're pretty set with their positions. We're going to get into the Rojas conversation. Do you think it's enough for them to get where we all want them to go, where come the beginning of November, we're all on Broad Street throwing a parade? Because I'll be honest with you, as much as I sit here, and you heard me yesterday voice some concerns, we're going to get into some of our concerns throughout the program today about this roster, about this team. Ultimately, for what the flexibility they had this offseason and for the opportunities they were provided this offseason, my answer would be yes. They did enough because they kept together a roster that was one win away from getting to the World Series for a second consecutive year. For all the conversation we've had this offseason about the fact they choked, to acknowledge that they choked in the postseason against an inferior opponent is telling me that you believed they were the best team remaining. And for the best teams in the National League by regular season wins over the last 2 seasons, we have seen what they've done in the postseason. The big conversation about this team that we kept getting fed time and time again, I think back to last July, June, August, we were talking about, we had Bastrolny on. Jason Stark, joins every week with the best show ever. The conversation, it was the phrase that kept coming up. This team's built for the postseason. They're built for a postseason run. Well, if they were built for the postseason last year, and they run it back with the similar team again this year, once again, you are built for the postseason. You're built to make that run. So I understand you might be underwhelmed with what you got in the offseason because, Yamamoto dreams, or because maybe you wanted to pick up that big bat, or you want a different pitcher than Aaron Nola. But ultimately, they've done enough because they've kept together the core that has put them in that position for a couple of years. The only one in this league that I could say has leapt ahead and made significant improvements when I bring up Yamamoto is the Dodgers. And sure, the Dodgers have gotten better. And that's going to be a concern going into this season. Were you going to be able to match the Ohtani Yamamoto offseason? No matter what you did. No matter what you did, you were not going to be able to match that star power. And the final thing is, while we look at this, and there are some people that I know you're out there right now thinking about this team in the lens of, wow, they've been a wild card team the last 2 seasons. Why haven't they competed for the division? Why not? Yes, the beginning of 2022, that was a disaster. Okay, there's a reason why Girardi lost his job. Thompson takes over. The whole thing happens that season. Last year, if you look back to what they had built and what they had expected coming into the season, the guy they anticipated being their first baseman was gone for the entire year. Bryce Harper, as superhuman as he was still coming off of Tommy John. And, oh, by the way, you saw the effects of him not being able to get the right angle and not get the right lift to hit home runs deep into that season. Even when he was hitting it well, he wasn't hitting it for the power that you would expect. We were all wondering when that was going to come back. And eventually it did. You looked at the workload of Wheeler and Nola and the way they started their seasons. Even just the slightest bit of improvement from the two of them in the start of the season puts this team in a better position. And, oh, by the way, the start of this season, for the first 6 weeks, kind of a cakewalk. It's kind of an easy schedule. So I know there's concern with this group about the way they've started the previous 2 seasons. But there's reason to believe they will start this season better. There's reason to believe that they can actually get off to a start with this core that puts them in competition for the things that a lot of you have pined for, despite the fact that they have gone to the postseason back-to-back years, went to the World Series, and then were on the doorstep of it a season ago. For me, when I look at this group, yeah, I've said it. I said it with the Merrifield signing. It was fine. It was, it didn't really move the needle too much for me. But honestly, I didn't need that much more done for me with this group. I would have loved to have seen it, but I was realistic with where they were and with the expectations they had with the guys they already have on this roster. I'm curious for you at 610-632-0975. Has this offseason done enough for you to believe that this team can get where we all want them to go? Because I say yes. And I understand when I look at the offseason itself with the moves that were made, it's not one that for people you jump for joy. I jumped for joy with Aaron Nola. I was on the air when that happened. I was thrilled. I made Pat Egan the most upset man in the world. I was getting texts left and right because he was listening to me at a station event as I was celebrating, and he's no Nola fan. I can tell you it's done enough for me. because this group, this core, I've seen what they could do come postseason time, and I believe that this season circumstances can allow for them to do more in the regular season for those of you that's what you're looking for right now. But I'm curious for you out there at 610-632-0975. Do you think this group has done enough to get them over the top, get them where they need to go? And that's where we'll start the conversation today. We're going to get Tom's thoughts on that. We're going to take your phone calls on that as well. And then with the realistic thought of this, obviously I think pretty highly of where this group could go. But we have to look at the concerns and what concerns us about this group, where your biggest concerns lie. We're going to get into a conversation about that coming up as we take you through the midday show here today. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas. Take you up until 2 o'clock right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
Dombrowski likes his team. I'm Tom Alborn. This update is brought to you. The Gut. Dynabite is the nutritional supplement created to boost your dog's immune system. You can now try Dynabite for free. Just pay shipping and handling. Visit
show ever starting at 2. Now more with Andrew Salchunas on 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
Welcome back. 97.5 The Fanatic. It's the Midday Show. I am not Andrew Salchunas. I'm Ray Dunn, filling in for Andrew. First couple days of this week, taking a vacation. Got Tom Alvord with me, and we're opening up today talking some Phillies. Okay? Dave Dombrowski speaking yesterday, mostly, like a lot about Whit Merrifield, but also addressed where this team is in terms of making moves in the offseason. And it is the one unique setup that we get with baseball where they're getting ready for the season. They're about, month and change from the season, and you still got big name guys out there because, baseball free agency, it's so fun. We love it so much. And that leads to the question of whether or not this team is actually done. And Dave Dombrowski said that they are not actively pursuing upgrades. They like their club. But, I guess there's still the idea that maybe something could fall into their lap. But that leads us to the question of, if this is it, if it's over, there is nothing more to be done here, are you okay? Have they done enough to put them back where they've been the last 2 seasons? In a World Series and a game away from the World Series. Because that's ultimately, that is where we want this team to go. And for me, I understand that for some people this may have underwhelmed. You might have been expecting more in terms of an offseason. But I believe they have done enough to put themselves right back there again this season. And they still have enough to put themselves over the top. Now, I think that way, or, pure belief of, again, we keep saying they choked, they blew it. Well, that whole thing means that you thought they were the better team than the NLCS. And I do. Which would mean that they were able to get themselves, again, amongst the final 2. They, again, are going to be able to put themselves in that position. We've heard time and time again, last year's team was the notion they're built for the postseason. Well, guess what? They're built similarly. They're once again built for the postseason. You're going to be able to get, and it's also with this group, you're going to have a healthy Harper from the jump. You're hoping you're getting the player that you paid for in Turner, and that's a big piece of all this. But knowing where this group is at and where the expectation with this group is at, I look at them and I have faith that, yeah, they have done enough. Now, Tom Alvord, I'm curious because I know we're going to get into concerns here. And I don't want this conversation to come across as, Ray thinks they're perfect. This is a team that's going to win. I think Dombrowski said it yesterday, where when you make a signing, immediately something else becomes your biggest weakness because there is no perfect club. And that's true. There is no perfect club. Even the Dynasty, there's nothing necessarily perfect there. Do you think they've done enough to put themselves back where they've been and to compete to get that World Series and put us down a parade down Broad Street?
I would like more. I'm still interested in more being added to this Phillies team. I don't think they're a perfect club, even though there's no perfect clubs out there. But I'll say this. I do think it's enough. As much as I do have concerns about this Phillies team, which we're going to go into in just a second, this is a team that was 1 win away from the World Series last year and 2 wins away from winning the World Series the year before that. And, oh, by the way, you have a full year of healthy Bryce Harper with a whole spring training to get acclimated at first base. You have a full year of comfortable Trey Turner, we hope, at this point. And who knows, maybe there's some bounce backs in order for guys like Gregory Soto, Sir Anthony Dominguez, who was maybe your best reliever. You could argue him and Alvarado 2 years ago when they went to the World Series. And last year he was unpitchable at times, it felt like. So as much as I would have liked more and still am interested in adding more, I think Dombrowski kind of put it well. He likes this club. I like this club. I might really like this club. I don't love this club, and I think a move or two could make me love this club. But when you look at the rest of the landscape of Major League Baseball, and especially the National League, the Phillies are right up there with the Dodgers and the Braves. They've beaten the Braves the last 2 years, and the Dodgers choke every single year in the playoffs. Until they don't, I'm going to say that they do. So I do feel pretty good about where this baseball club is right now.
So it's enough.
I believe so, yes.
It's enough. I'm not saying it's perfect. And if, again, you listen to me over the weekend, you listen to me talk about this team this offseason, there was, I was really in pursuit of that right-handed bat in the outfield. I'll be honest. Ever since they did the whole Rojas might start in AAA, which, by the way, we're going to get into because they keep saying it. I don't know what your other option is. Like, you haven't given yourself that option. Well, you tried with Merrifield, I guess, to give yourself that optionality of, okay, well, if he's bad, that's your insurance policy. Okay. I think at some point we're just going to have to roll with the whole Rojas is going to start the big thing. But regardless, I'm curious for the people out there at 610-632-0975 if you think they have done enough. Because I think for some people, the underwhelming nature of what this offseason became, where you make the Nola splash early. And again, the Nola splash for some people is not a splash. It's, a disaster in their mind. I will never understand you people, but hey, to each their own. To each their own belief on the guy.
It's more of a drop than a splash, if you will.
Exactly. It's more of a, are you serious right now? Can you believe it? But you make that early on, and then you just keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, Friday, we got to tear this fan base in half with debating the signing of Whit Merrifield. That is your second big thing of the offseason. And I think for some people, that underwhelming nature has led them to question whether there is enough. And I think the focus here should be, hey, wait a second, aren't you returning a ball club that was right there last year? And we keep saying how much they did to stop themselves from being where they should have been versus, and again, credit to the Diamondbacks that did win the series. This is not did the Phillies lose it or did the Diamondbacks win it? No. Obviously, Diamondbacks went out there and they came back, won that series. But we've been pretty consistent in saying this team did a lot to get in their own way of winning that series. And to me, that's the hallmark of a group that we all believed was good enough to do it again last year. And look around at that team. There are some guys that did have their, best seasons, but others that we expect more out of, and I think we can expect to get more out of this year.
Yeah, and I mean, the guys who had their best seasons, a guy like Castellanos had one of his best seasons last year. He has had very good seasons before. Like, there was a reason he got that 5-year, $100 million contract. Now, do you worry about the streakiness? Do you worry about him maybe going cold for multiple months and having a bit of a down year compared to last year? Yes, but it's not like last year was an outlier for Nick Castellanos. He has done it before. Some of the guys who had good seasons, the younger guys, Bryson Stott and Alec Boehm, they had their best seasons of their careers. These are guys in their mid-20s. Who says that they can't get better this upcoming season? So, and then you, of course, talk about a guy like Zach Wheeler, who's just been an ace since he has been here. Aaron Nola, it's an even year, so maybe we'll get a great Aaron Nola this season. Ranger Suarez has a full spring training. Like, yes, there are concerns and there are question marks, and there are probably things that are going to be added to the deadline, which worries me because of how non-active the deadline has become in Major League Baseball. But this is still a team that, despite how poorly they started last year, despite all that went wrong last season for the Phillies, where Nola and Wheeler weren't ramped up, where you didn't have Harper, you had a horrible Trey Turner, this is still a team that finished with 90 wins last season. You could argue that they are better than that team that you had last year that won 90 games and was a win away from the World Series.
Yeah, and that's like where this conversation starts about whether they did enough. I think we were all expecting like the splash above, and also I think and I'll speak for our generation of Philadelphia Phillies fans, and to be fair, I think for a large majority, because this team does go through long stretches where it's not positive and
That's fair
it's not
to say.
competitive the way it should be. You think back to the window of competition the last time around, the golden era, the 07 to 11, and you're thinking about, well, after they won the World Series, what were they able to go do? Or, 2009, after that season, go get Roy Halladay for 2010. Like, you're expecting, like, hey, can they go dial it up and give me that type of move? And for some people, it's like, okay, you brought back Aaron Nola. That's cool, I guess.
And I think that's a big part of it. It's because of how early it happened, as you mentioned. Like, this happened, it feels like 6 months ago that they signed Aaron Nola. It was legit one of the first signings in baseball. It might have been the first in this free agency. It's how early it happened. And I try to think of it like this. I'm curious if people would have the mindset that they do now that are anti-Phillies, like, oh, they need to do more, if it was Blake Snell instead of Aaron Nola, if it was a Jordan Montgomery instead of Aaron Nola, a Yamamoto instead of Aaron Nola. Would you feel differently? And it just so happens to be Aaron Nola, a guy that let's be honest, I think some of us have grown tired of here in Philadelphia. But as frustrating as Aaron Nola has been and as up and down as he has been durable. He has been damn good when he's good. And the biggest thing to me, and I had my questions about Aaron Nola. Last year, he proved to me one thing, that despite his season falling off the rails at points, he is a big game pitcher. I know we're all going to remember Game 6. He was fantastic before Game 6 of the NLCS. So to me, you get durability, you get a high ceiling with Aaron Nola, and he is a big game pitcher. He's done it 2 postseasons in a row. Was he perfect? Did he have a 0.00 ERA in the last 2 postseasons? No, but he has been fantastic in the postseason 90% of the time. So to me, you get durability, you get a very high ceiling where he's much more comfortable with that pitch clock towards the last month of the season. Hopefully he can translate that to an entire season. And to me, he can prove that he can do it on the big stage, which the Phillies have been on the last 2 seasons and hopefully again this season.
Did you ever think in your life that you would utter the phrase, Aaron Nola is a big game pitcher?
I didn't think that like 7 months ago until he proved it to me once again. And again, he has his flaws. He does. But he was fantastic the first 2 rounds of those playoffs in, Game 2, I believe it was, of the NLCS.
Now, I know our guy, Kevin Cooney, right around this time, I think gets off his break. Because usually he's tapped in right at the beginning of this show.
You get a text like every 10:30 every day or something?
I know 10:30. We had a conversation this weekend about it. Because I can hear him when you say he's a big game pitcher. I can hear him retorting in the back of my head of, well, check his ERA the second time around in those series, playing those teams. And to that point, I tip the cap to Kevin. You got a point there. Guess what? He's put you in the position at the beginning of those series to go out and win them. I will not. He is not in my top 3 of blame when it comes to why they did not get out of the NLCS last year. Not even close to my top 3 of blame for why they did not end up winning the pennant last year.
The first 3, and again, the guy has his flaws. He is not a perfect pitcher. And I'm not saying I'm not concerned about the Nola contract, because that is a lot of years going to a guy who has been, just let me say it. Let me say it.
I'm letting you say it. I'm just getting ready to respond.
That does not mean that I am not a bit concerned about the Nola contract. That is a lot of years for a guy who can be very hot and cold, and a lot of years for a guy who has pitched a ton of innings in the last 5 seasons. How long can he keep that up? However, despite my slight concern with the contract, this is his first 3 starts in the postseason. He ended up finishing with 4. This is the first 3 starts. 7 innings, 0 earned runs, and he had 3 strikeouts against Miami. 5 2/3, 2 earned runs, 9 strikeouts against the Braves, and then 6 innings, 0 earned runs, 7 strikeouts against the Arizona Diamondbacks. That is the first 3 starts of the postseason for him against 3 different teams in 3 different rounds. The guy can do it. He has his issues, yes, but the guy can do it. It goes back to my original point, though. I think if it was a different name than Nola, people might be feeling a little bit differently about this offseason.
Well, yeah, everyone you made your decision about Nola like 4 years ago for a lot of people. It's like, yeah, that's. Once we got to like the collapse of 2019 or honestly 2020, because I think that image of him pitching against the Rays, I think sticks with a lot of people. Like at the end of that season, where that would be like, oh yeah, he blew it. I mean, that team blew it. That the whole we have to go win 10 in a row and then somehow still missing the playoffs. An expanded play. It's fine. We went through a lot. It's good that we have a team that we're talking about whether or not they have World Series.
Last 2 years, buddy. Last 2 years.
Exactly. But I think people made up their mind on him. But I'm curious, again, not to turn this into the Aaron Nola. We've done the Aaron Nola dialogue. We did the Aaron Nola dialogue for an entire summer, pretty much, as we were leading into the idea of him being a free agent last year. And I'm curious for you out there at 610-632-0975 whether or not you believe this team did enough to get them where they need to be and get them to the point where we are celebrating down Broad Street. Now, let's go to the phones. Let's talk a little Phillies. Let's go to Norristown and talk with Grant. Grant, you're on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Hi, I just want everyone to know first that I have cancer and I'm incarcerated. But also, I don't think we should re-sign Bryce Harper into his 40s. I think that's a terrible idea.
Well, Grant, first off, I hope you get better. I appreciate sharing that with us. And in terms of not signing him into his 40s, the extension, I think, is a weird time for him to bring that up, but you're totally against any type of re-signing there.
Because I think he's too injury prone, and I don't think his numbers will be able to perform as well at that age.
I mean, I think that's a very fair assessment. And Grant, I appreciate the phone call. Thanks for checking in with us today. Again, I hope you do get better. Talking about just making that extension. I don't like the time and place of the extension talk with Harper. I'll be honest with you. One, the fact that you're only 5 years into a 13-year deal. Like, listen, I understand, and John Middleton kind of set himself up for this one a little bit when I think 2022 when they win the pennant, and he's like, hey, he's been worth everything and more already. It's like, whoa, don't say that. Scott Boras is somewhere listening, and Scott Boras is clearly livid that there was no opt-out. He made that. If you go back and listen to the podcast from this winter, this offseason, where he was talking about the potential extension, where all this came from originally, you could tell that he was livid. They did not have an opt-out in that contract.
Jason Stark said it himself when he joined the Philly Hot Stove Show, probably a couple months ago at this point, but Manny Machado, his other client, got an opt-out. He was mad, or I don't know the exact phrasing, but he was upset. He wanted Bryce Harper to get himself an opt-out. Jason Stark seems to think that this is Scott Boras' way of just getting Bryce Harper that much more money and saying, oh, he is that much better than a Manny Machado. So I think that's kind of what it is, but you are correct. The premise of this is John Middleton saying himself that basically Harper is underpaid to Bryce Harper, and Scott Boras being Bryce Harper's agent.
Yeah, and listen, I think with this extension, like, I'm not going to go the whole, like, start screaming and yelling about Bryce. I'm not thrilled about the timing of it. I understand probably his thought process of, like, I want to play here. Like, he realizes the leverage he has, and he's going to try and work that now. I can't do the extension talk right now, especially when we're trying to extend an actual player that has an expiring deal after this year. Like, please let the Wheeler thing finish up before I have to start thinking about a contract that when it ends, I will still be a decently young age, but I don't want to think about how old I'll be when that ends, okay? I don't want to think about where I'll have to be at life, okay? When that contract was signed, everyone did the same thing. Wow. When that contract ends, I'm going to be fill in the blank. I'm going to have to be fill in the... That's still a long while away, okay? That's still 8 years. I could barely plan for 8 days from now. I don't need to think about extending a guy whose contract doesn't end 8 years from now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't love the timing, especially when there's still question marks about this team. Guys that you have, Zach Wheeler, guys that potentially you want to bring in, the Blake Snell, Cody Bellinger, much more likely a Jordan Montgomery if it happens. Like, there's still question marks here. I would understand this if this is a year or two from now. After you win a World Series, when Bryce Harper's more in his mid-30s and he goes, listen, guys, I want to be here till I'm 40-something years old. Sign me. And you know who's going to do that? John Middleton and the Philadelphia Phillies are going to do that. I'm with you. I don't love the timing. Bryce Harper is going to be a Philly for life. It's weird, but I'm with you. It's not necessarily something that I'm outraged by, I would say, at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I just, maybe I'm not spending the energy getting outraged over it because I just, it's one of those things I just kind of roll my eyes at. Like, is he really doing this right now with the extension? Like, can we just please move on with the extension talk? I want that. I wish this had been like a news dump thing. Like, the Phillies and Harper reworked the contract to get – and listen, that's, again, I'm not on page 700 of the CBA. So that's my bad on that one.
Bad job by
you. Poor work on my part. But, like, I don't need the right in my face, give me the extension. You're under contract for 8 more years, okay? And you're under contract for 8 more years. Again, and Grant mentioned it, how injury-prone. Like, we don't go with the injury-prone stuff because, like, the swing of his life, beat the Padres.
He's finished seasons. That's the big key.
Right.
Here. Some people that are injury-prone don't necessarily finish seasons or playing their best come playoff time. Bryce Harper continues to do that.
He's injury-prone. He is a fantastic healer. But when you think about, like, that 2022 season, how much time did he miss that? And that wasn't, like, originally, before everything with the elbow, like, missed a good amount. He missed a good chunk of seasons. This team's been able to keep itself afloat without him. And it's not, they don't need Bryce. Obviously, they need Bryce Harper. But he's kind of in a good, fortunate place that this team's was able to lift themselves up in 2022 without him. That kind of jump-started this run. Because had they not, I think the narrative around Bryce Harper around this town would be a lot different.
And I know you've had this conversation before, and I'm not necessarily saying that's what you're saying. I don't view Harper as injury prone. I view him as a guy who, they've been a bit of freak injuries, getting hit in the face, a torn UCL as an outfielder, which is the big reason why he's moving to first base. Like, injury prone, I think of a guy like Ben Simmons, where it's a lingering back injury, or you're lingering having knee injuries, whatever. And Harper has had a back injury, but to me, he's a guy who misses maybe a couple weeks of the season. A few of them have been freak things. A major injury, yes, maybe it's not a freak thing, but that's not something that is going to happen time and time again. You hope not with a Bryce Harper. So, yes, you have concerns about his body breaking down. He's a very violent swinger, as we all know, but I have trouble calling Harper injury prone.
Okay, instead of using the word prone, he has had issues staying healthy.
That's better.
He's had issues being available over the last 2 seasons. Whether or not we sometimes use injury prone as like a fault. Like it's this guy's fault he's hurt. I'm not saying it's his fault. But when we talk about missing time, like he's missed a considerable amount of time. And Grant Norstead, like a guy who swings as violently as he does, do I think it's going to age as gracefully as we all hope? Probably not.
Probably not.
Am I still saying that I want the guy to be on my team for as long as possible? Of course, because you look at that talent. So I'm not trying to turn this into a wow, Bryce isn't the guy we thought he is. You know, it's just, I think there is some good fortune on his side. In the bad fortune of some bad injury luck, there's good fortune that the Phillies turned it up in 2022 because look at where baseball was in the summer of 2022 as they were, really the spring of 2022 as they were slipping down the path with Girardi, We were concerned, I was at the ballpark. It was not like it was for October, I think he did have a little bit of fortune with the way that team turned it up. All right, but I'm going back to this offseason thing, and we really didn't get a ton into the concerns here, so I want to make sure we do get into the concerns, cover the concerns we have for this season. We'll continue to take your phone calls with, do you think they did enough this offseason at 610-632-0975? Do you believe that this offseason was enough to get them that parade down Broad Street? And then, obviously, we'll get into our concerns. We're going to look at, again, what this group, what might keep them from where they're at, where we want them to get going to. And then I want to get into a little bit with the Eagles coming up in the 11 o'clock hour about the extensions. And there's something I talked about a little bit this weekend. Tom sent to me. It was one of those things I was like, all right, yeah, we gotta hit this. Priority list. A lot of things got to get done. But like every good to-do list, you need an order here for everything to get done. We'll get into that again. Take your phone call, 610-632-0975. I'm Ray Dunn, in for Andrew Salchunas here on the Midday Show on 97.5 The Fanatic. We continue on in the midday show here today. Want to let you know our 10 o'clock hour brought to you by Window Nation. Take advantage of Window Nation's 50% off sale on all style windows. Plus, make no down payment with no payments and no interest for 12 full months. Call 866-90Nation or visit windownation.com. Starting off a lot of Phillies today. And a lot of Phillies for good reason. Dave Dombrowski spoke yesterday, and really we got a lot out of it in terms of why Whit Merrifield's here, what they hope Whit Merrifield does, who Whit Merrifield is, how much they appreciate Whit Merrifield, and the fact that Whit Merrifield, if you didn't hear, is a Philly.
A lot of Whit Merrifield in there.
Yeah, just a bit. But he did tell you that they're not actively pursuing anything else. Again, it's always, I have my one eyebrow raised when it comes to, hey, that free agent's still out there. They want a short-term deal. They want to win. They want to go to a place where their agent's got a good relationship with the organization. Maybe they do something. But they said they're not actively pursuing something else. Did they do enough this offseason to put them in a position to win the World Series? And as underwhelming as you may feel in terms of, wow, there wasn't that, eye-popping move. There wasn't that something big that happened. I said with the trade deadline in the NBA, when the day starts with Buddy Hield and ends with trading Jaden Springer, you feel a certain type of way. If it had started with trading Jaden Springer and worked its way to trading for Buddy Hield, you probably feel a different type of way. If this offseason started with nothing, or maybe started with Whit Merrifield and then ended with Aaron Nola instead of start with Aaron Nola, and, oh, man, nothing's happening until, okay, Whit Merrifield. Sure, we'll break camp. Yeah, sure, we'll bring him into camp. Maybe you feel a little bit differently. And I feel as if this team, which has been on the doorstep, which was on the doorstep of a World Series appearance last year and the doorstep of a World Series the year before, it's not enough. They've shown me they're enough. Now, we wanted to get into the concerns. And we're going to continue on the phones at 610-632-0975. We will get to you. We will take your phone calls on it. But I want to make sure that we actually cover the concerns here. And, Tom.
Right.
When I ask you the biggest concern that you have, because, again, they can have done enough and you can still have concerns. Every team, if you don't enter the season with a concern, I'm more concerned about you because that means you're not being honest with yourself. There's concerns in everything you do. Everything that happens, okay? If you just live without concern, and maybe you're doing a great job, but I can't get there. With this baseball team, I will feel good about them while still having concerns about them. What is the biggest one for you as we enter the 2024 season?
Yeah, as we said, I like this team. Dave Dombrowski likes this team. You like this team. That doesn't mean the team's perfect. The team does have concerns, and there's a couple of them for me, but there's one that's big. It's the bullpen, which might sound crazy because when you look at some of the rankings around baseball, I saw one on Codify on Twitter last night that literally had them as the best bullpen in all of baseball, which to me, I'm just a little surprised by. I get the talent that is there, and if everything goes right, this bullpen can be absolutely lethal. The problem is Craig Kimbrell pitched you 70 innings in the regular season last year. I know. I get how it ended. I understand that. If it wasn't for Craig Kimbrell, that team's not in the postseason. He carried that team in the first half of the season when the starting pitchers weren't going deep and the rest of your bullpen was kind of beat up with Sir Anthony going on the IL and Alvarado going on the IL. If it wasn't for Craig Kimbrell in the regular season, you're not getting to the NLCS. And again, I remember how it ended. So you have 70 innings that you have not filled in with Craig Kimbrell to make up from last season. You could theoretically say, yeah, Orion Kerkering can throw those 70 innings for you. I think that is an extremely risky idea to have a kid that was in single A to start last season, have him, all right, go out there and give us 162 games. I know he's not going to pitch in all 162, but you get what I'm saying. He has a high leverage role for the entire season, a kid with a young arm. That concerns me. You could also look at Jose Alvarado. I think that guy's nails. I think he kind of ran out of steam a little bit towards the middle of the season, but then he was his same old Jose Alvarado self. I have no concerns about him, truly, unless, look, he's had a lot of workload the past couple of years. Does that kind of add on? I think they're relying on a bounce back for Sir Anthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto. Could those things happen? Sure. They also just could continue to regress, and Sir Anthony Dominguez will never get back to who he was 2 years ago. I also think there's potentially some regression for Jeff Hoffman, who was a journeyman guy who literally was out in the street, and you signed him last year, and he was your best reliever that you had, one of your best relievers you had. So there's a lot of innings to make up. These guys have pitched a lot of high-leverage innings, so IL stints here or there are probably likely. The bullpen still is a concern for me, and maybe I'm crazy, but one more arm would do so much for my confidence in this team. That's my biggest concern.
One more arm in the sense of they go out and pay like what big money for one more arm, or you're just looking at literally bringing in an arm to bring in an arm?
No. I mean, it needs to be someone that can relatively pitch you high leverage. I don't need someone with closer experience or anything like that, but maybe this is a guy that I could rely on in the 7th inning. It's not a guy like Dylan Covey who I can really only count on in like the 4th or 5th inning. And I know Covey was relatively good down the stretch, but you know what I'm saying? It's more of a guy you can count on to the high leverage innings. And I know you're fuming right now because I can just tell.
No, I mean, it's
fine.
I'll
say a guy. All right,
no, we're going to talk ourselves into Covey. No, not you. This is not a you conversation at all, because I'm rolling my eyes because there is one person in my life who gets under my skin, who I talk to a lot about baseball, who is trying to do the Covey thing with me already.
Is pro Covey.
Yes, yeah. Okay. Incredibly pro Covey. And look at the if you really take out when he was bad, he was good. It's like, yeah, if you take out when he was bad, and then when they started pitching him in situations that didn't matter, yeah, absolutely he was good.
So it can't just be a Dylan Covey type guy where we throw him in. It's just a depth guy. Like, I would love another guy that you could count on in the 7th inning. You can never have enough high leverage bullpen arms. They were in on Jordan Hicks. He decided to sign with the Giants to be a starter, which I think is the dumbest thing in the entire world.
Funny.
They were in on a guy in Robert Stevenson, who I forget where he went, but it was another bullpen arm. An arm like that would do so much for me. And you could just say, just trade for him at the trade deadline. Could have said that last year, too. And what did they not do? Trade for an arm at the deadline in the bullpen. And what was one of the big reasons you fell short last year? It was the bullpen. So it's easy to say, they'll address the bullpen at the deadline. I have concerns, again, that the deadline maybe isn't as much out there as we think. So, yes, back to the original point, bullpen is my biggest concern.
Devil's advocate for you on that point about them not trading for an arm. Would they have been in a better spot if they had used Lorenzen in Game 4? So Game 4 is the game where
that's when Sanchez went.
Yeah, when Sanchez went, Kimbrel ends up in the game, I think, in the 8th, and that's when it all blows up.
I mean, potentially a guy like Lorenzen or even Taijuan Walker, because he can give you more innings than 1 2/3.
I just meant, like, piggybacking off of Sanchez. Like, we all, I think, looking back, everybody wants Sanchez to get the start. And that might be revisionist. I'll go check the tape. But Sanchez gets the start. The thought process in my head is, why isn't Lorenzen?
Correct. Lorenzen
has done this out of the bullpen. Walker, I'm fine if you don't pitch him out of the bullpen.
Yeah, they pitched Hoffman in like the 3rd or 4th inning in that game.
Right. I thought if we were doing a piggyback thing here, I would like a combination of Sanchez and Lorenzen to get you through 4 or 5. I realize I'm relitigating something that already happened. It's not going to happen again. But when we talk about trading for arms at the deadline, Lorenzen, the way he was billed was, look, he's had an all-star season to start, but by the way, he might be able to throw you out of the bullpen. We might be able to make it work. And it's like, well, okay, why didn't you? Why didn't whoever came up with that game plan for Game 4, whether it be the organization, whether it be Thompson, whether combination of the two, whoever the minds it be, why didn't we see that?
Yeah, and it's a really good point. And that Game 4 is going to haunt us. I know we're all going to remember 6 and 7, but Game 4 really is what kind of undid it. To me, yes, there were different options there. It's just like, how many guys in the bullpen did you really, really trust last season towards the end of the year? It was Alvarado, and it was maybe Hoffman, and even Hoffman blew a save, I think, early in the season. I forget what he wasn't perfect last year in the postseason. To me, you can never have enough high leverage arms when you are going for a World Series. I think back to the Astros when they beat the Phillies in the World Series, where their bullpen ERA that whole postseason was like under 1. Like, that's what the Phillies could potentially do. One more bullpen arm, high leverage, not 9th inning, but 7th inning. That's what I want. Still could happen, but that is my biggest concern.
So it's interesting you mentioned the bullpen ERA, and I don't have it right in front of me, but I do think for the postseason last year, like, save Kimbrel, and again, ERA is good except for the places where it's bad. Like, it was again, the ERA last year, like, pitching is, again, not the reason why they didn't win that series against the Diamondbacks. Like, the pitching was really, really good, and the batters who you pay, like, this team is invested in out hitting you. They have 2 horses at the front of their rotation. Suarez has been a difference factor and the reason why they've gotten past the Braves over the last couple seasons. Also, the way they managed Game 1. Like, I still think back to Braves Phillies. Like, that's part of the reason why they got by. Hitting is where they've invested a lot of money, and that's where actually my concern lies, is in that outfield and in left and center. And that might be me like casting us off the hook of saying, can he replicate what he did a season ago and really what he did at the beginning of last season? Because we've seen the swings back and forth in his production. But ultimately, you're making a bet that Brandon Marsh and Johan Rojas, I guess, are everyday guys. And that, to me, is a pretty steep bet to make. Like you're really betting on quite a bit here because you saw Rojas in about 60 games hit 302 at the major league level. That was fantastic. Got to the postseason, got to that level of pitching, got to that level of moment. Whoo, was it not good? Marsh, I brought it up yesterday, and I'm sorry. I'll live in my calculator for 30 seconds here. Batting average on balls in play, nearly 400, which means 4 out of every 10 times he put the ball in play. Like it's ending
Very
up as
fortunate.
a hit. Yeah, it's ending up as a hit. Like that's not sustainable. Or he's going to make it sustainable, and I'm going to be an idiot, and I'm cool with that. If he wants to make that a sustainable thing, I'm cool with that. But that's more my concern. They've made the bet there, and that's part of the reason why when they make the Merrifield signing, I sit there and say I'm okay with it because I understand their thought process as an organization and what they think they have. But I was also one who was like, hey, right-handed power bat in the outfield, that'd be cool because ultimately if Roas seems like the bigger question mark of hitting at the bigs right now just because we all remember the postseason, how it went. And if he's not able to do it, at least you can move Marsh to center. You have power right-handed bat for left field. Right now, that's where my biggest concern lies, mostly because I do think while you say it's difficult to pick up that arm at the deadline, I think they'll be able to grab one. I use the phrasing all the time, electric arms. I think they have enough of them at the back end of this bullpen where they make it work. And it's also interesting the way they've built out the depth of this pitching on this team. Like with every 40-man move, every kind of transaction they make that's under the radar that you're just like, they got to fill innings. A lot of these guys are multi-inning type coverage guys, which you're going to need like in the current setup of the way they manage pitchers and also the fact that you're limited to a certain amount of pitchers on your roster. You need guys that can cover multiple innings. I was surprised. The Bilotti DFA actually kind of surprised me. I'll be honest. I didn't see that one coming of all of them. I thought there were other guys that probably could have went first. Even my guy Marte probably could have been one that went first. But
I was confusing. I knew you liked one of the.
No, it was not Covey.
That's why I thought you were rolling my eyes. Now I remember it was.
It was the authentic. It was the expo. It was the card show where Ricky and I did the 15-minute back and forth on Junior Marte because I was all Marte'd up and he got DFA'd maybe like 3 days later.
Sounds about right.
Or maybe not DFA. I think he might have just got sent down. But whatever it was, I remember walking in very soon to this place afterwards. And Ricky looking at me like, come on, man.
Yeah.
One of us was a pitcher of the bigs. I was like, that's a good point. Ricky's got a point.
I've said that before, I would have liked a lot more if they went into this season with a platoon role more at center field where you have Marsh and Rojas platooning in center field and you add a left fielder, preferably a right-handed power bat in left field. I think they really, really think they have something with these two guys. The odds that they're both everyday players throughout a 162-plus game season, I'm still holding out a little bit of doubt there. But I think I like the Whit Merrifield signing a little bit more than you do. I think that is a really good insurance where, say Rojas is hitting 210 the first 3 weeks of the season, he's got to be sent down. Do I love Marsh getting everyday at-bats in center field? But they're still trying to figure out what he is. You have a guy in Whit Merrifield who at least will give you one thing, hit for contact. I know he struggled towards the end of the year last year, but this is a guy whose average is always up there, and he can give you a little bit of pop, can obviously steal bags. So I think I was freaking out before the Merrifield signing. I still don't love the situation, but I feel a lot better. Yeah, and I think ultimately they believe that it's going to be Rojas because I do think even Dombrowski yesterday was like, Blue Jays said they overexposed him. Like, Merrifield had a good average throughout the beginning of the season because they were able to use him in spots that were advantageous for him. That's why him getting a start over Marsh once a week because they got a lefty on the mound and they don't want Marsh out there against it. That's good for both Marsh and Merrifield. Stott, we all love the way that, Stott's developed as a hitter, but hey, if they need to give him a day where they can get Merrifield at second base, that's another option there. So that's why I'm okay with it. Now, I want to go back to the phones here at 610-632-0975 because I mentioned the outfield being a concern. And we were gonna get into some conversations about this man at some point, but I know Jay's gonna take care of this for me because calling from Trenton, Jersey, where we're going with in the outfield. Jay, you're on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Yo.
How are you?
Hey, how you doing, Dickie Dunn, man?
I'm doing good. What do you got for me?
You guys are talking good stuff. We need pitching. We do. We need, but you know who we need, man. You know we need Mike Trout. That's the player we need to go grab. Him or Cody Bellinger. We need to make that move, man.
All right.
What
So
do
you think Trout's on the move?
At the trade deadline, I think we could get him.
Okay, well, if you think it's at the trade deadline, I can't do anything right now for him aside from just hope that at some point he gets upset, right?
Because he said he doesn't want to leave, but once we start winning, and the Angels aren't going anywhere, I need him. We need him. Him or Cody Bellinger. Bellinger's a free agent too.
I know Bellinger's a free agent. You're waiting pretty much for the entire market to drop out on him, I think, if that were to be the case. Like, I don't know if I get the situation where it's going to end up where he makes his way here. I think you're probably in line if we want to get into, like, the remaining free agents, probably the pitchers, if I had to guess, if that would be, like, the fit they would go for. I'm not against Bellinger. I don't want to turn this into, like, oh, I don't want that guy on my team.
I was about to say, wow, I wasn't expecting you to go there, man.
No, I'm just saying, Jay, look at the fit on the roster. Who do you think they were more likely to go after?
Trout. We need an out, like you just said.
I'm saying the free agents.
Free agent. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I got you. Jay, it's good to hear from you. I appreciate you checking in. Thanks for making the call. Yeah, listen. I have long had the stance, and this was something that I think that we got into, I want to say it was football season about Hopkins, where I was like, more talent on the team is better than less talent. It's like, it's not a complicated thing for me.
Yeah.
Like, especially baseball. It's not my money. They've already gone over the second threshold for the luxury tax. It's not my money, ultimately. Like, I understand the limitations put in place by the team on where they're going to spend, what they're going to do, because, that's just nature of the business. They're spending more than almost everyone else. Like, I can want them to spend so much money and understand that, like, $260 million worth of payroll at some point, they got to make things work at the margins.
They've also spent the second most money this year in free agency out of all teams in baseball, which is crazy to say. But
Aaron Nola, yeah.
Yes, but technically, they have the second most money spent in baseball this
I want them to spend that money, so I'm not going to sit here and be upset that they spent it. Listen, he brings up Trout. Who doesn't want Trout? Like, I get it. At this point, like, it's like, oh, does he really want to win? Does he really want to? I think I would take it.
Look, man, all I'm saying is we wanted Buddy Hield for years here in Philadelphia, and who did we get this deadline? It's Buddy Hield. We've wanted Mike Trout for years here in Philadelphia. There's another deadline coming up in baseball, probably a couple months from now, more like 5-6 months. But, hey, I'm just saying, anything can happen.
In one calendar year, the city of Philadelphia gets Buddy Hield, Mike Trout, and Marcus Mariota. We are so happy. We are so happy.
It's a great point as well.
We are overjoyed. We finally did everything we wanted to do in the 2010s. It only took us till 2024.
Yeah, the Trout situation, it's so tough because, he said that right now he doesn't want to trade, and that, of course, gets everyone going, puts the alerts up and everything like that. But he's not going anywhere until the deadline. And the way the Angels operate, a horribly run franchise, I'd be surprised if he's traded at the deadline, honestly, unless Trout says, I want to be traded right now. So,
which, hey, Trout or friends of Trout, I know you're around here. You're listening in right now. Do it. Say it, okay? Make the power move. Let's end this charade, all right? We don't need to speculate anymore. The Angels aren't winning, which is the funny thing, because he's like, I want them to go out and sign the free agents. And it's like, okay, that's a nice directive to put out there.
What is Blake Snell going to do for the Angels?
Well, what is he going to do? And do you believe they're actually going to do it?
If they haven't at this point, probably not.
I mean, hey, listen, if it works out where they get somebody and, they can make it work. Like,
that team is so much more away than one big free agent acquisition.
Especially Blake Snell.
Yes.
You still got to cover the 4 other innings when he pitches. Which also, you brought up the projections that had, this was the bullpen projections.
There you go.
Those are words. I use them. That had the Phillies as the best bullpen in baseball. I went through, and I think it was a Fangraphs thing, and I went through just one of the programs they use, and I just wanted to see what they projected out different pitchers. Their projections have Aaron Nola and Corbin Burns making the same amount of starts, and Burns pitching just an inning and 2/3 less than Nola this season. If they make the same amount of starts and Corbin Burns is within 15 innings pitched of Aaron Nola, I'll eat my shoe. Like, I would be shocked.
Only contract year is the only thing for Burns. So is he trying to get major money, go all out, and pitch 7-8 innings every single time? He can do it. He just
Hasn't done it before.
Doesn't happen all that often.
No. With the injury problems they've had in that Orioles rotation for a while, I'm pretty sure they're going to be cautious with when they get a Cy Young type guy. But, hey, maybe I'm wrong now. All right. When we come back, we'll reset a little bit of what we got into and then get into this Eagles conversation that we wanted to get into because a couple of candidates to get an extension. Tom wants to rank them. He wants you to pretty much list out your priorities, what you want this team to do. So we'll get into that, reset a little bit of where we've been with the show, and get into, again, a little Eagles offseason chatter as we continue on here on the Middays program. I'm Ray Dunn, in for Andrew Salchunas, right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic. 975thefanatic.com.
Well, welcome back into the Midday Show. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas here as we continue on through your week. Got me for the rest of today. Tomorrow, Connor Thomas will be filling in Thursday and Friday. And Tom, I believe it is Silvano with Connor on Thursday. That's right. So you got Tom and I for the next day and a half as we continue on here on the Midday Show. I want to let you know our 11 o'clock hour brought to you by Golden Nugget Jewelers, where Philly gets engaged. And we've gotten to a lot of Phillies talk early. Shocker. Tom and I get together and break into some good Phillies conversation. And the question today, Dave Dombrowski said effectively yesterday that they're done pursuing things. Something comes to them. I imagine they're not done listening to what's going on in the world of baseball, but they're done in the active pursuit of building up this team. Is it enough? Is it enough to get this team where we want them to go? And that's a parade down Broad Street. I say yes. And I'm curious how you feel at 610-632-0975. Is the offseason enough for you? And that is, again, the what leads us to this team. We've gotten some good push on this conversation into different kind of branches of it, of the Harper extension conversation, which drives me nuts. Time for Trout. Jay wanted us to know that, and I want to make that very clear. The Bellinger conversation with Jay is not that I'm anti him. It's that if you were to look at this roster and how they would build, and Tom, I would love your input on this one as well. Do you think it's more likely if they were to get one of the, again, they're calling them the Boers 4, the 4 free agents left? Do you think it's one of the starting pitchers or one of the position players?
I would say the starting pitchers.
Right.
That's who they've been linked to. That's how this team, they already have one of the better rotations in baseball. They like to add to it, and they do potentially have a hole at the 5 spot. Christopher Sanchez was great last year. Maybe another guy due for some regression. So, yeah, I would say the starting pitcher.
And even if you love Christopher Sanchez, I think there's a lot of people that don't love Taijuan Walker. Even though he's getting paid, he's going to be the starter. You're upgrading at least the 4 there too. So
me and Taijuan Walker are the only people in the Taijuan Walker bounce back train. So I refuse to comment.
Well, when we were having a conversation during the break about fantasy baseball, I've been a Walker subscriber for a long time. I've been one of his biggest advocates in the fantasy baseball world, which came back to bite me last year.
Has he lost you? Or no, you still got a little bit?
No, he lost me last
year.
year.
Okay, fair enough.
I see his value for a regular baseball team. You need guys to pitch games. That's a big thing. So I'm happy to have him. He's a better 4 option than a lot of teams have out there. But let's be clear. Last year was the moment where I was like, you know what? It's time to pursue other avenues. Taijuan Walker and I went our separate ways. He didn't know that, but we did.
Probably never will.
No. I doubt he really cares at all. I hope he doesn't care. That would be a problem. Now, so we've gotten into a lot of baseball, and you can jump in again at 610-632-0975 on just the conversation about whether this offseason was enough for you when we look at the pursuit of a championship for this Phillies team. Now, Tom texted me this yesterday, and it was something that actually Brendan Gunn also. So basically everyone that I've been working with over the last couple of days has had the idea to want to get into something like this. Because B. Gunn, on Saturday, kind of threw my topic right back at me and was like, hey, no, this is the way this is going to go. I was like, all right, dude, fine, man.
You say so.
You run the show.
Relax.
God, jeez, man. But I mentioned this weekend how my priority right now with this offseason for the Eagles, and the thing I want to see them do the most, is figure out this Hassan Reddick situation. Because you are not a better football team without Hassan Reddick. In fact, your defense will lose its most talented player, most productive player, and ultimately, you are now going from replacing basically half your defense already to now not only replacing more than that, but actually replacing production. Some of these guys you're replacing on defense, you're like, well, yeah, it's got to get better because it should get better. Here, you actually have to go about replacing one of the only, I think, 20 guys, 16 guys had 11 sacks or more.
You're replacing potentially your best player on defense.
Yes.
You can have the conversation that Hassan's the best player on defense.
And your best pass rusher in a decade, at least. A decade plus right now. So that to me has been priority number one. B. Gunn listens to me say that, and he's like, well, wait a second, Ray. There's a lot more that has to happen with this. I said, all right, now, go ahead. So he brought up Devontae Smith. And then you, being the genius you are, Tom, brought in Landon Dickerson. So we want to get into a little bit of a rank conversation here. And this is a conversation of all candidates to get an extension this offseason. Hassan Reddick, Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson. Hassan Reddick needs the extension. It's extension or bust, it really feels like with this. I mean, unless nothing materializes for him out there and he's forced to come back, and then you have an unhappy Hassan Reddick, and then that's just not going to work. So I feel like your hand is forced here on this one, and he deserves the extension. For every bit of what he's done, he deserves that extension. If he doesn't get something elsewhere, I think it's probably because the price tag is too steep to both give up assets for him and give him that contract, whereas the Eagles just have to give him that contract. But I'm curious. Hassan Reddick, Devontae Smith, and Landon Dickerson. What is your priority list? How do you rank out the list of giving out extensions? Because, Tom, I'm interested for you, because you were quick to present this one. Do you have a definitive list that you would go in order that you would want to see these extensions get done?
I do, and it's not necessarily me thinking, like, whoever finishes last on my list isn't a guy that I'm not interested in.
You're running them out of town.
Yes,
I got it.
Exactly, yes. But I do. I mean, I've thought about this for a little while now. All three of these guys, I think it's very important for them all to get extended. In an ideal world, I'd love all of these guys to be back here not only next year, but for multiple years after that. But I do have a list. Yes, I do have a ranking. Would you like it?
Please share.
Okay, all right.
Please. Tell the class.
So when it comes to Hassan Reddick, Devontae Smith, or Landon Dickerson, all very, very impactful players, all players that you could argue maybe the best at their, not the best, but in the conversation for some of the best at their position. Devontae Smith, one of the best wide receiver twos in all of football, could be a wide receiver one. Look how he performed in that playoff game without A.J. Brown, if he was given the opportunity to do so. Landon Dickerson, I know the line struggled a bit last year, a little bit of a down year. Landon Dickerson still grades out as one of the best guards in all of football. That's a guy that needs to be here with an offensive line that's already getting maybe 2 spots gone because Jason Kelsey's gone, and then you have to replace your right guard because Cam Jurgens moves over. And then, of course, Hassan Reddick, local kid, double-digit sacks in the last 4 seasons, all very important players. To me, it might seem kind of shocking to some. My number one priority is still Devontae Smith over Hassan Reddick. The reason it is for me, obviously Hassan Reddick is important. Obviously, this dude is the best player on defense. I literally just said that to you. And defense is something that is very important going forward because of how it ended last season. To me, though, Devontae Smith, this is still an offensive league. You look around the rest of the NFL and see some of the skill position talent on some of these better teams in the NFL, especially the NFC, when you look at San Francisco. And also, oh, by the way, you look at Jalen Hurts' cap hit continuing to go up. It's still not bad for the next 2 years, but it's going to continue to go up. To me, and by the way, A.J. Brown, look, I think he's content here. I don't think he wants to go anywhere. But A.J. Brown, you could say, is maybe a bit of a wild card. So who knows what is going to happen in the future. That's all I'll say. I'm not saying anything is going to happen there, but you just never know. To me, making sure you have 2 wide receiver ones to pair with your franchise quarterback who is 25 years old is immensely more important. Not immensely. Is a bit more important than re-signing a 29-year-old turning 30 defensive end who's going to be making a lot of money. Want all 3 of them. Want both of them. But to me, Devontae's number one. Re-signing your 25-year-old wide receiver one who is a wide receiver 2 right now just because he doesn't have an option because A.J. Brown is here. Then it would be Hassan Reddick. And lastly, it's Landon Dickerson. Nothing against him, but it's just because when you look at the positional value, I think wide receivers in today's league and defensive ends are much more important than guards, unfortunately. So to me, want all these guys back. Hope they are all back. And I think, honestly, they all will be back. But it's Smith, Reddick, and Dickerson.
So we agree on the third priority there. And this is not a show to rip on Landon Dickerson. This is just I think also the nature of the position when we're sitting here, and I could say we have a little bit of our passion driven into this than just the business side of this. I think if you went to the Eagles and you're like, offensive lineman ranking 3 in importance of bringing back, they probably would not agree with us on that one. I think they would be at least a little more intrigued than we are in making sure that extension gets done. And we want to make sure it gets done. But in terms of priority, in terms of what we want to see, it's no surprise Reddick and Smith are amongst our top 2. But I want to sign Reddick, most certainly. And for the reason that you lay out of, hey, Devontae Smith is young, you obviously don't, you make the point of, well, whatever happens with A.J. Brown, you have Devontae Smith, you want to put him there with the quarterback. I look at that offense is immensely talented. I look at this defense is not. It's just simply not. It is not an extraordinarily talented group. And there is a lot of expectation of being able to retool and reshape this team. That defense, if you are really, truly believing that they are going to retool and reshape and not rebuild, ripping away its most talented player is a mistake, is an absolute mistake. And again, I'm not saying that that you don't want to give the extension to Hassan Reddick, but it has to be your utmost priority because the only hope that you really have of building a defense that is competitive is by building around some sort of talent. And right now, if you told me next season that we would enter basically free agency, we'd enter this offseason with the idea of, okay, you have to add to Josh Sweat and Nolan Smith as the two guys that are going to be your edge rushers. And maybe you get, again, you probably bring back Brandon Graham. That's your 3 core pass rushers. That's not enough to get it done. It's just not simply enough for me to get it done. Right now, if you give the extension to Hassan Reddick, likely by the end of it, yes, you are going to be overpaying for the production you're getting. You have been underpaying for him for the last couple of years. And no, we're not into the business of thank you contracts here. That's not what we're about doing. But ultimately, for the next 2 seasons, the high level of production you get from him in exchange for what will be probably the last year of that deal or, potentially last 2, again, depending how long this extension is, how much you end up paying him. You are also getting the guy that we have said the ceiling of Nolan Smith is. The ceiling. Right now, you have a young player who people believe the ceiling that the prospect he could become is literally the guy you already have. Your hope is that you have someone that becomes that. Wouldn't it be great, 1, for him to learn under that guy, and for 2, to already have that level of guy on your defense? We've seen it. And to me, Devontae Smith is a fantastic wide receiver. I say it all the time. The biggest miracle in the world is that they have drafted a receiver that is as good as Devontae Smith. As much as we love A.J. Brown because, he is extraordinary, we have the attachment to the our guy. That guy was an Eagle first and an Eagle only. And I kind of feel that way about Devontae Smith where it's like I watch him. He makes the incredible catches. I'm like, how? The number of wide receivers that, especially over the years that led up to Devontae Smith, that you drafted and you were like, wow, how in the world do you end up making this one work? Ultimately, though, when you have another receiver of that caliber, I can see why it would take the back seat to my Reddick conversation because, oh, by the way, you've got A.J. Brown, you've got Dallas Goedert, and I still believe you have the franchise quarterback. And I think that makes a dynamic offense. And again, Goddard, I think at some point we got to start having the conversation about who's going to be the succession plan there. But keeping that out of the conversation about the 3 we're extending here, I think I go Reddick because I look at that defense and it's just devoid of talent. And if you're retooling in a time where you are competitive, where you are competing, I need you to make that happen. I need you to make that happen now.
Yeah, you mentioned one key there. The first thing, I think next year, I think Hassan Reddick being on this team next year should be a bigger priority than Devontae Smith next season. But we're talking about a contract extension. We're talking about multiple seasons for these guys. Where 2-3 years down the road, I think Devontae Smith is much more important of a player than Hassan Reddick, just because I believe there's going to be a drop-off. Maybe that's unfair. Hassan Reddick's still 30 years, or he's going to be 30 years old this season. He could still be a high-level pass rusher at 32. That's absolutely possible. But what is Devontae Smith going to look like at 27 years old? So next season, I think it's much more important for Hassan Reddick to be here than Devontae Smith. And again, I think both of these guys are going to be here. But going forward, I think especially with that cap number going up, and oh, by the way, wide receiver money going up and up as these contracts get bigger and bigger, I think Devontae Smith being here long-term, 3-4 years down the road, is a bit more important than Hassan Reddick. The key there that you mentioned is how did they fall into Devontae Smith? They've been not so good at drafting wide receivers, getting wide receivers here. That's another one of my concerns. I know that this Eagles team can build a defense. Regardless of what happened last year, this Eagles defense has been good pretty much a majority of my life, of my adult life here, the past decade or so, 2 decades. They have been a good defense. I know that how they value the trenches, the defensive line. I understand that. Bringing in guys like, even a guy like Chris Long, Connor Barwin, they're always going to be adding guys on the defensive ends. What I know the Eagles do not do well, and Howie Roseman admitted this to you because he traded for A.J. Brown instead of drafting a wide receiver with that first-round pick. This team cannot develop wide receivers. They are not good at it. It is just not what they're good at. They are very good at developing offensive linemen and defensive linemen. The Steelers are very good at developing receivers. The Eagles are not good at it. That's just an organizational flaw of theirs. I have a bit more confidence that they'll be able to replace a guy, not say that they can match Hassan Reddick's production, but they can find pass rushers. They can find guys on the defensive line that are going to make an impact. If they lose Devontae Smith, I have very little confidence that they're going to be able to replace Devontae Smith in the draft. And then you're talking about signing a guy, a wide receiver, for big money when you could have just signed Devontae Smith. So that comes down to it for me as well. I have more confidence in the Eagles being able to rebuild that defensive line than I do them replacing a guy in Devontae Smith and drafting a receiver, because other than Devontae Smith, it's been since Jeremy Maclin that they drafted a guy that I trust in.
All right, so when you look at this defensive line, because we talked about, obviously replacing guys in the past, because this has been a talking point when two of the mainstays of that defensive line every year for the last couple of years has been a discussion of whether or not they're going to end up retiring. Whether it's been Fletcher Cox or move on, maybe not retiring, but Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. How long will they be Eagles? We've talked about replacing them. Obviously, you lose Hargrave last year. The conversation, how do you replace them? And something that's been incredibly underrated about the Hargrave departure is that Jalen Carter, that whole being able to pick him when Hargrave ends up leaving, you were not positive that Carter was going to fall to you at that point. You were not positive that was going to be able to come to fruition. So the guys you had drafted before, Davis doesn't exactly play the role that you would with Hargrave. You had Milton Williams there, and now you have Carter, and now you've also drafted Nolan Smith. You have already shown investment in that defensive line for the succession plan. Now the question is, do you trust that succession plan? Because when we could talk about how the fact they haven't found wide receivers in the past, and we love what they've done to build depth on the defensive line, top-end talent, top-end production, because I believe they're all very talented players, but can they produce at a high level? Do you believe that right now they have the plan in place to produce at a high level on that defensive line in a life beyond Hassan Reddick? Right now, because this is a team, obviously, that's built to win, that we believe they are building to win right now.
Right this second, absolutely not. Because you have, Jalen Carter, I have confidence in. I think a lot of us do here in Philadelphia. I think he hit a bit of a rookie wall. Jordan Davis, it's still a question mark for me. He's shown signs. That's still a question mark. He got worse the second half of the season, and he wasn't very good his rookie year. And Nolan Smith, I say it all the time. If it wasn't for Jalen Carter being drafted with that first-round pick, Nolan Smith would be a much larger conversation than that has been, because he was a bust last year. It does not mean he's going to be a bust in the future. He was not good. He was unplayable at times, and they showed you that with the limited amount of snaps he was getting. So right now, right this second, I don't feel very confident. This could all change, however, come draft time, because it takes one defensive end being drafted in the first round for this to be completely different. Now, again, they have to go out there and be able to prove it, but I know that they are going to do everything they can to replace that defensive line and make that as strong as possible if they lose Reddick, because of how this organization operates.
So, you mentioned it right there. If they end up losing Reddick and they use a first-round pick on a defensive lineman, all the issues they have on that defense, and we go back to the well on picking another defensive lineman. At some point, you have picked an edge rusher at the end of last year's first round. You picked interior defensive linemen in the last two first rounds. And I'll even throw in the third-round pick of Milton Williams the year prior to that. You've invested top-end capital on defensive line. If you have to invest again this year on the defensive line, one, because you wouldn't pay a guy who's already at the top of his profession during a time where you're trying to be competitive in your competitive window, and then you have to throw another pick, another resource at that, to me that tells you that you're acknowledging that there has been at least one mistake in there, and frankly, I think you're not building enough to the back end of your defense that we saw needs a lot of help.
Yeah, potentially. I think they're in a unique situation here where their defensive line was so good for a long time, and the guys that have been staples there are starting to be on their way out. Like, you're talking about replacing lifetime Eagles, a Brandon Graham, talking about replacing a guy in Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, who was really good here for like the 4 or 5 seasons that he was here. It just so happened that you were really good for the past 5 years. Now those guys are all either getting major contracts, or the other thing, which is getting older and older, where, again, Son's going to be 30. Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham are basically 1 foot out of the door already. So, yes, I think it does show a little bit of a flaw. And, who knows with Nolan Smith. If Nolan Smith had a good season, I'd be feeling a lot more confident. So who knows what's going to happen with Nolan Smith. But I think a big reason that you are putting so many assets into your defensive line is, one, because of how the organization runs, and two, because you had a really good defensive line for a while. These guys are starting to get older, and you have to replace these lifetime Eagles.
Well, the way I took it was that the lifetime Eagles were already being replaced, that we had already drafted the replacements for our lifetime Eagles. This is what the last couple of drafts have been about. For the lifetime Eagles, yeah, I can understand replacing them. I can understand replacing them. Even though Fletcher Cox, I think, had a really solid season. I can understand, replacing him or replacing a Brandon Graham. I can't understand letting probably one of the top 15 pass rushers in the league go because you're not going to pay him. But I'm curious for people out there because it's a good back and forth. Neither one of us, because someone listens to this and says, wow, Ray wants to run Devontae Smith
Ray
out
hates
of town.
Devontae Smith, yes.
Tom wants to run Hassan Reddick out of town. No, it's just really a conversation. It comes back to a lot of what you value and what you believe this team needs to do in building this team forward. So give us your priority. We assume, let's work under the assumption that we all want these guys extended. Okay? You're giving out extensions. Which one is the one that should be ironed out first? Which one is your priority to see this offseason?
Priority number one.
Priority number one for you to get the extension done. Is it Hassan Reddick? Is it Devontae Smith? We'll take that for you at 610-632-0975. Now, I also want to get into a Sixers conversation. And this is another thing that, Tom, you had said it, and it was something that when I left here yesterday, I was thinking a lot about. Because that last hour of the show became a lot about Tyrese Maxey. Became a lot about Tyrese Maxey and not a lot about, hey, there's other guys on this roster. And when we look at what the Sixers have to do coming out of the break, really leading into this tough stretch immediately following the break, and then in terms of strength of schedule, difficult compared to the rest of the Eastern Conference, what they need to get done and who they need to get things done. I've got a question about that to pose to you on the other side as well as we continue on here. You could jump in. We've got some Phillies talking about whether they did enough this offseason. Obviously, this question of priority number one, the Reddick extension, the Smith extension. And now we'll get into a little Sixers coming up in the next segment. You can jump in 610-632-0975. I'm Ray Dunn. Take you until 2 o'clock right here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Welcome back in. Midday show here on 97.5 The Fanatic. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas. Getting some well-earned rest this week. He will be back with you next week. We got into a couple of things early on here as we get about midway through today's show. As we open up with the Phillies, did they do enough? Was this offseason enough for you? Tom just sent me something a little interesting that I think we'll take a look at in a second. But I think they have. I mean, you look at a team that was on the doorstep, and no, it wasn't a sexy offseason, but ultimately they've kept the core intact. That's put them in that place back-to-back years. Yes, the Dodgers got better. Considerably better. Not going to have Shohei on the mound this year. So that's a piece of what they paid for that they're not getting. Well, that they'll eventually pay for. I say they're not paying too much right now in that regard.
Yeah, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Paying it.
Yeah. My kids will be watching them pay that, I guess, at some point, allegedly. I mean, maybe potentially kids. I don't know. Something like that down the line. But
who knows? Maybe Harper's still under contract with the Phillies.
Well, that's when the extension's going to kick.
Yes.
Will Harper be a Philly when the deferrals start being paid? 610-630.
Great question.
But some reaction to that conversation about whether they had done enough. We got into some of our bigger concerns. And then in talking about the offseason, of course, the Eagles offseason conversation of, well, who would you go with the extension first? Who's the priority? Reddick or Smith in terms of the priority here? Now, a couple of people chiming in on the old Bird app. You know, I love to scavenge Twitter for people just trying to hop in on the conversation. Mike jumped in with his biggest Phillies concern being closer. Not sure who's going to close out games. And then he's looking at the center field bat production as his second biggest. So I think he looked at the two things we were most concerned about. He's like, yeah, I think those guys are probably kind of right on that
Took
one.
it a little bit deeper than us, more specific, but yes.
Closer, I mean, I would guess they're banking on the bounce back from Sir Anthony. I can't imagine they throw Kerkering in the closer role to start this.
Yeah, and a lot of people I hear talk about it say Jose Alvarado is going to be the closer, which I think he's your best bullpen arm, but I think they love his versatility. I think they love that he can pitch at any time against, and whenever the highest leverage inning is, whether that's a seventh, eighth, or ninth inning. Yes, he puts out yes, absolutely. So I would probably say it's going to be Dominguez to start the season is their hope. Maybe it's Hoffman. I really don't know. But, yeah, I don't think Kerkering's going to get thrown in there right away, and I think they like Alvarado's versatility too much. I'm not too concerned with the closer. I just want another bullpen arm. That's all.
Yeah, and, I mean, the one that I would believe that if they had to, like, do the closer role, true closer role, would be Dominguez. And that's going to be another thing. I can't wait. You know, the baseball debates I'm excited for. Do you need someone that's actually deemed the closer, or do you just need high-leverage guys? It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Well, we're going to get into all that. We're going to have fun dialogue.
Can't wait.
I'm sure. But, yeah, no, also, I want to be in media long enough where fireman becomes the official term for the best bullpen arm and not.
Where have you heard that from? Did you just create
I just
that?
keep using that.
That's pretty good.
I don't like. I like to think I came up with it. I also like to keep myself grounded in reality, where like there's a chance that I heard it once and I just started running with it. But I'm going to take credit for it.
Nah, you can take credit for it.
I'm going to take credit for it. Okay, so yeah,
I'll start using it too.
Yeah, we're using the fireman role. Okay, that's the official phrasing for a bullpen arm. Now, an interesting one. So appreciate you, Mike, for checking in with us. Center field bat production. I mean, we went over that. Hope Rojas is it, and we're going to get to that clip at some point. I don't want to get into that a little bit later. So the B Money checks in with all caps. So I might want to do this while yelling because it feels like I'm being yelled at.
Please don't.
Are you sure?
Please.
Are you positive?
Yes.
I'm telling you, turn down the volume in your headphones now. Phillies made the biggest mistake a team can make and let go of homegrown talent. That's 6 exclamation points. They lose the World Series this year because they let go of Rhys Hoskins. The Eagles' priorities: DeAndre Swift, Hassan Reddick, Fletcher Cox. Whoa. So a couple of reactions to this one. Is there someone on this station that's more pro Rhys Hoskins than I?
I don't think so. I don't really know.
Yeah, like
everybody's opinion on it, but I don't believe so.
Yeah, I would say I'm probably, if not the biggest, one of the biggest supporters of the guy on the station. No, I don't think they're losing the World Series just because of that one this year.
They did pretty well without Rhys Hoskins.
They did, and I did want. And yesterday we talked about it. Are they a better club without? I don't think so. I don't think they are.
There's something to be said about him being taken away from that locker room. I know he wasn't in that clubhouse all season long, but he was still there. He was the heartbeat of that team. I do have concern about that being removed from the locker room, but on the field, he did not play for you all last year. You 90-win team, and you were a win away from the World Series.
It's funny you mentioned that. In September, I was down, I believe I was at an event, and some guy was talking to me, and he just got into a natural Phillies conversation and mentioned, hey, do you know the day that Rhys Hoskins came back to the clubhouse? I was like, I don't have a pinpoint in my brain. It was like June 2nd or June 3rd. And he was like, he rattled off the record since it. And I was like, wow.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was something like that, where that was like his first.
Because that's when
back.
they started the turnaround, obviously.
Right. And I was like, that, okay. Now, ultimately, they're still a very talented team without him in there. I think it's going to take more than just as a vibesman myself, takes a little bit more than vibes to win in this league.
And he wasn't there all of the postseason.
Right, because he went down and he was getting ready.
To get ready in Clearwater.
They started to struggle in the postseason because Rhys has 6-1-0.
They got to the third round of the playoffs without him.
Messing around.
But again, it's regardless. That is something to worry about, but I think there's enough good leadership in that locker room.
Yeah, I think they're going to be okay. It's Bryson Buddies. If this was a band, it would be called Bryson Buddies.
And, Schwarber's done a ton. Obviously, Garrett Stubbs is the Wiseman. JT, I think, he doesn't talk a ton, I don't believe, but I think he's very strong in that locker room as well. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, and then the second part of the tweet, the Eagles' priorities. DeAndre Swift, Hassan Reddick, both those guys are not homegrown talent. They're guys from here. They are not homegrown. The Eagles organization, in terms of developing the two of them, they both were successful with the Birds. But DeAndre Swift, unless, you're saying that St. Joe's Prep needs him back, that's not the homegrown talent type conversation. Hassan Reddick, unless you're saying Temple needs him back, the homegrown thing doesn't work when they're not players that actually weren't drafted by your organization. And it's amazing when you list the priorities. He got to 3 of them, and 2 of them were not Devontae Smith and Landon Dickerson in terms of priority.
And 1 was a running back.
Yeah, who I made it very clear. Thanks, but no thanks. Good luck. I hope you get paid. Have fun.
And as we talked about yesterday, I would like DeAndre Swift back, but I also understand how interchangeable running backs can be in the NFL. And as long as you use some sort of asset on it, then I think they're going to be okay. Yeah, I have problems saying that DeAndre Swift is the number one thing they need to be worried about this offseason.
It was the first one he listed as priority. So I'm just reading. I'm just reading what the people are tweeting. All right? That's all I'm doing here. All right. Now, I teased this coming into the break, and then now I want to kind of get to it. And it's a thought process I had, because yesterday I'm driving home. And ultimately, I'm thinking about the show. I'm like, well, what did we get into? What worked? What didn't? And I'm like, we spent a lot of time on in the 1 o'clock hour? Tyrese Maxey. And you know how much pressure we put on Tyrese Maxey in that 1 o'clock hour? I mean, I don't believe that he's now feeling the pressure because we said it. But we put a lot on the shoulders of him. And what we did not discuss a ton of is literally everyone else. We mentioned that there are guys that are going to take pressure off. Buddy Hield. I got into the conversation about how I feel about the bigs. But I was like, the rest of the roster obviously plays a part in all this as well. And what we're talking about, maybe it's not enough. We had the conversation of, hey, look at this squad that Nick Nurse a season ago took to a 500 record. Do you think he could take this group to a 500 record to get themselves going through the rest of the season, knowing how tough the schedule is, knowing just obviously what you're up against without Joel Embiid and then without other starters right now, because we're not sure the availability of guys coming out of this break. So all that goes into my brain. I'm like, all right, well, tomorrow, we got to, you can't just beat Maxey and nothing, because if it was just Maxey and nothing, it's 1-5, and that's not going to work for the Sixers. They will lose. Maxey's a tremendous player. They will lose every game if it's just 1-5, okay? Bold take there, I know. Now, Tom, with that said, today or last night, at some point in our pre-show planning here, you sent me a text that went right along this thought process of, okay, take Maxey out of it. Who's the Sixer that needs to give you the most? Who do you need to see the most from to make sure they stay afloat in this time without Joel Embiid? And I'm intrigued because I think there was one on your mind, and I'm curious who it sticks out to you that would be that player during this stretch.
Well, there is an answer here, but I kind of have a feeling that I already know that this answer isn't going to be the one that is correct, because I've seen it time and time again that this certain player has kind of come up short at times when the Sixers have needed him. It should be Tobias Harris. Like, Tobias Harris is your highest or second highest paid player on the team. Tobias Harris is a guy who's in his late 20s, who's been here for, 5 seasons now, I believe. Like, Tobias, if there's ever someone that needs to step up without Joel Embiid, it's Tobias Harris. Unfortunately, and I like Tobias Harris a lot, and I think sometimes he gets a little bit too much hate in this city. Unfortunately, there's been times where Tobias Harris has needed to step up, and you get cautious, kind of passive Tobias Harris time and time again. He'll have these great stretches. He will, but when he is really counted on, he is not as consistent as he needs to be. I always will point back to last year, where in Game 6, I believe he had 2 points in that game. Now, in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals, he was fantastic in that first half. Dragged that team along, even though James Harden and Joel Embiid had no interest. But in Game 6, when you needed him, he was not able to step up. You needed something more than 2 points. And again, we know how this works. It's a star-driven league. Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey need to be the best players for this team to win this season. Tobias Harris needs to be the guy that steps up in Joel Embiid's absence. I don't think he'll do it consistently enough. So my answer is probably Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield is the acquisition, a guy that obviously they've been targeting for a while, a guy who's been really, really good for the Sixers in the short time here, the week or two that he has been here. I think Buddy Hield is going to be the one that steps up most other than Tyrese Maxey and kind of keeps this thing afloat without Joel Embiid. The answer should be Tobias Harris. I think it's going to be Buddy Hield.
So it's so funny because maybe this is where my expectation is at with Tobias Harris. You posed this question. Tobias was just out of my mind.
Dude, I felt the same way, honestly.
He was just entirely out of my mind, and that's just an insane miss on my part, and I'll hand up on that one. That's just ridiculous. You know what? Tobias called me a casual on that one because he doesn't even stick out in my mind of like, oh, he's going to do it. I forget who it was, the writer that had the line of, if you need Tobias to put up 30, he's putting up, 15. If you need Tobias to be a role player, put up 15, he's putting up 15. Like, he's just is what he is. Like, that's kind of where he's at. And he's, again, I think he does. I think you're right there where he gets too much hate at times where we kind of, pile on to the guy. But, he's making close to $40 million. And at some point, I know, we've both worked with someone that told us, you got to forget about the money at some point and just, like, let him be the guy. It's tough to forget about the money.
I will not forget about the money.
I know, but I can hear his wisdom in my head right now. Forget about the money. I can't. All right? I can't forget about the money. And that, to me, I can't believe that I went into this thought process without Tobias Harris is, like, the highest paid guy that's going to be playing with this group without Joel Embiid out there on the floor. He's got to take the reins here. I think that says just about everything I need to know about the way I feel about Tobias Harris. I'm sitting here thinking about, okay, Buddy Hield is on the cusp of a payday. He's got to step up and play and show his worth for, obviously, whoever's next to pay him, whether it be the 76ers or not. But also, he was traded here. We talked about it. He was the best guy acquired at the deadline. He's got to step up. And then I look and, we talk about getting paid, talk about the contract he got. 76ers made an investment in Paul Reed to be their backup center. When you become the backup center for the 76ers, there is an understanding that even if Joel plays the 65 games to be eligible for all the awards, all those things, there's still going to be just under 20 games where you're the guy by yourself. There is still 17 games, Not all of them can be scheduled losses. Obviously, this is a larger sample size than just the amount that Embiid would miss in a season where he plays 60-plus games. But there's an understanding that you have to be able to turn it up, and there's an understanding that you have to be able to show your worth there. And, that clause in his contract, you remember if they don't make it out of the first round?
Yes.
Or it's like,
it's all guaranteed, or it's guaranteed if they make it out of it.
Right. If they don't, it's not.
Not guaranteed. Yes, thank
you. It was supposed to be in there, the kind of the Jazz twist the knife a little bit, Danny Ainge with a little fun add in there of, they'll make it out of the first round. They just won't get out of the second round. They'll be fully guaranteed they'll have to pay Paul Reed the contract because they have to match it here. Paul Reed. One of the big things again out of that first round, getting your guaranteed money, that contract, it's going to be you helping keep this team afloat. You got money on the line for that. And ultimately, again, he's a young player in this league. Love the energy with him. You know, the guy who usually sits here during this time slot is not a big Paul Reed guy. I think he sometimes gets a little carried away with the Paul Reed hate, if I would be honest with that one. But ultimately, you kind of you need him to be something beyond just that backup center that could get you the 10 minutes. That ultimately is more than the role you signed up for. Like when it was Paul Reed, just the Paul Reed experience, when we're not going on the Paul Reed victory tour and we're not, talking about how great everything, is with the potential with him. Guess what? You got paid like you're a backup center in this league. Now it's time for you to fulfill the responsibilities of being Joel Embiid's backup. It's not fair for the long extended run, but ultimately it's not a game about fairness because if you don't fulfill that contract, well, you're not going to see some of the money you signed up for.
It wouldn't be fair to ask this from him in previous seasons when he wasn't getting enough playing time from Doc Rivers and he was still a young guy, not making a ton of money. When you signed for a 3-year, $23 million contract this offseason to be the backup center, we shouldn't be having conversations about Andre Drummond needing to come here with Joel Embiid's absence. Now, look, I get it. You want to upgrade as much as you can at any point, but when you pay that guy $23 million, you were hoping that he was going to be able to solidify the backup center. Man, I'm still seeing Mo Bamba minutes at points. Like, it's obvious that Paul Reed, there's still a little bit to be desired there from not just us fans, but from the coaching staff as well. So you're right. Obviously, there's bigger names that you need to step up. But Paul Reed, you were paid to be the backup center here. And like you mentioned, that's not just 10 minutes when you're playing Detroit on a Tuesday in February. No, like that is when Joel Embiid, your star, who has obviously had a history of injuries, is going to be out for multiple weeks, potentially, and hopefully not multiple months. If there's anyone that needs to step up with more consistency, yeah, it has to be Paul Reed. And real quick, back to the Tobias Harris point. Tobias Harris, he does have these games. He puts up, like I'm looking at the games that he's had in Joel Embiid's absence. I see a 28-7 game. I see a 26-10 game. Unfortunately, I also see 11 points, 13, 17, 9, 14, 12. These are games without Joel Embiid. And I know he was sick a little bit, whatever. But we have seen this from Tobias Harris time and time again, where he can give you, when he has that aggressive type mindset, that is the best Tobias Harris, is an aggressive Tobias Harris, he can do some really good things for you. The problem is that aggressive Tobias Harris is not nearly there enough. And it needs to be with Joel Embiid here, with his absence. And it hasn't been so far with Joel Embiid's absence, not nearly as consistent enough. Tobias needs to be putting up 20 points a game plus without Joel Embiid. I get Tyrese Maxey. He is number one. You have Buddy Hield. Great acquisition. Tobias Harris, the second highest paid player, making $39 million. It needs to be 20-plus points per game without Joel Embiid. And you're getting way too many of those 12, 13, 14s, and 9s.
It's the highest paid on the court right now.
Yes, correct.
That's what it is.
By $20 million. Buddy Hield's making $19 million.
Yeah. Okay. This is your role, Tobias. Go out. This is your time to go out there and ball out. I get it. Tyrese is the all-star here. He's made the leap into that conversation, and we're expecting a lot out of him.
And he will be the second highest paid next year.
We let Tobias Harris off the hook in the 1 o'clock hour yesterday. Is basically with the truth of it. We did all this about Tyrese Maxey being a number one. We did not do a single thing about Tobias Harris being a number two.
But I think it's because a lot of people share our same sentiment. And again, I think people are too harsh on Tobias in this city. He's kind of out of sight, out of mind at this point. You're not even thinking of him to be the guy to step up. You're not even thinking of him to be the guy that can carry this Sixers team for multiple games, not just a game here or there, multiple games, be the guy to carry this Sixers team to kind of keep them afloat. I'm not saying, again, you go 10-2 in the next 12 games and Tobias Harris is your leader. No, but you need to keep this team afloat. We haven't seen him do it nearly as consistent enough as he needs to with that contract the last 5 years. So why would I, why would you, or why would a lot of people out there expect him to do it now in Joel Embiid's absence this year?
Now, in the interest of fairness, and then this is not in Tobias Harris conversation, it's back to Paul Reed, because Paul Reed's the one that jumped to mind.
That is your answer, then?
That
Paul
would be
Reed.
my answer,
Okay.
yeah, because, again, I'm not going to pretend like Tobias was the first one that jumped to my mind. Like that, and that's, again, probably how I feel about Tobias. He's going to get my 18. I'm going to sit there, wish I got more, but there's going to be nights where I get more and I'm thrilled. There's going to be nights where I get less and I'm going to be upset. Unfortunately, the ceiling that I'm looking for is not there. Paul Reed, what I mentioned stepping up, the last 4 games for the All-Star break, I'm not going to pretend like they didn't happen. Like, he was solid in those last 4 games for the All-Star break. Like, part of when they get healed and they win the back-to-back games, one of those over Cleveland, like, wasn't bad. So I'm not going to pretend like overall, that it's been a terrible experience, it's a disaster. I can't trust this guy. But ultimately, I need this needs to be his time to step up. And part of that is going to be, his money's going to be counted a little bit with how this team does the rest of the way. And part of it is, again, you signed a contract here to be the backup center. You were the plan at backup center. This is part of your responsibility to help bio this team as we continue to move forward. So we're curious for you out there at 610-632-0975. If, we remove Tyrese Maxey from the conversation. We did a solid hour of Tyrese Maxey conversation yesterday about where he needs to step up. Removing Maxey from that conversation, who is the Sixer, the non-Maxey Sixer that in this time without Joel Embiid you need to see the most from? Because we're curious about that with you at 610-632-0975. Now, also, we've been talked about it a couple times, came up in our concerns. It's like a fun little nugget they keep throwing into every time that Dombrowski speaks, every time someone from the organization speaks about Johan Rojas. Well, if he makes the club, okay. If he doesn't, where are we going with this? Tom and I are going to try and break that down, because where we're going with this is either I needed them to stop using this throwaway line, or, oh, man, we're in for a very interesting platoon situation for that start of the season. We'll take your phone calls on it. We'll talk all about it. 610-632-0975. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas here on the Midday Show here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Welcome back. 97.5 The Fanatic, the midday show. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchuna. Continuing on, take you into the afternoon here on this Tuesday. Best show ever coming your way at 2 o'clock. Tyrone Johnson, Rick Metallico, and Jen Scordo. I want to let you know that our 12 o'clock hour, well, we had what it was brought to you by before my computer shut down right there. But that's okay. I'm going to get you that 12 o'clock sponsor in just a second because it was not on my... Now it is. Service First Heating and Air Conditioning. Get 0% financing for 70 months and a $500 rebate when you purchase a complete heating and cooling system from Service First. Learn more at ServiceFirstHVAC.com. As we opened up with some Phillies talk today after Dombrowski spoke yesterday exclusively, almost, about Whit Merrifield. And I think that might also be a sign of what this offseason was because... there was a lot there, but one of the things that I questioned coming out of that one, and we opened up with a discussion of whether or not this offseason was enough, and then took a look at some other things, Eagles and Sixers related, looking at some offseason priorities for the Eagles, and then for the Sixers, who, outside of Maxey, really needs to have the biggest stretch here without Embiid. And we'll take your phone calls and all that, 610-632-0975. But the one thing I left the presser yesterday with Dombrowski, like, little... dumbfounded on was really the lack of a question and the lack of a answer, I guess, on this continued conversation about, well, if Rojas makes the team. If Rojas makes the team. And we got for you here Dombrowski speaking because it's been one of the things. They said it early in the offseason, and it kind of, at that point, just seemed like, well, you know, guy struggled in the postseason. We want to make sure he has it at this level. Like, you know, he was our option there at that point, but maybe we'll pursue something else, or maybe, you know, or hey, Rojas, go work over this offseason and you know, earn your spot on this team. The fact that it came up again is interesting to me. And this is it was part of the Merrifield conversation. So Dombrowski addressed where they want Whit Merrifield to play, and also, again, gave the impression that, you know, once again, it's a question for Rojas making this club out of the spring.
In one scenario, if you said Rojas does make the club and Marsh plays left and Stott plays second, and both of them we think will continue to grow. Stott hit left-hand pitching very well. Marsh continues to grow versus a real tough left-hander. Well, Merrifield's two best positions are second base and left field, so he could spell either one of those two. But he could also go to third. He could also go to short. He can play first.
If Rojas makes the team. Now, Tom, I know that at some point during the Dombrowski conversation yesterday, there was the talk of, well, maybe he was overexposed. You know, maybe the Blue Jays suggested that maybe he was a little bit overexposed at the end of the season. That's
Merrifield, you're saying.
Yeah, Merrifield hit, you know, 300, and then towards the end of the season, obviously had his struggles. If you think Merrifield was overexposed, and you think that, you know, he signed up to be here because he wants to play the role that you have for him and not necessarily be an everyday guy, do they not have an everyday player right now? Like, is there one everyday position that's just not there? Because if you really play them at the word of, like, Merrifield, bench option, solidifying the bench, Rojas not making the team, are you moving Marsh to center? And then your left field is some combination of Merrifield,
Jake Cave,
like
Christian Pache,
like, because that to me is where my mind starts to go. Okay, you keep repeating this at me. Is this just you again trying to encourage the idea that Rojas has to earn his spot and he has to play his way onto the club, and you have to have a good spring to make this team? You know, this is a team competing. We can't have guys like, if he has a disastrous spring, okay, I could see them sending him down there. If it's, I'm not going to throw at numbers because, you know, what are they looking for out of the spring from him? It probably goes beyond just what they see out there, you know, in the few at-bats he gets every game. But I'm curious, what is the solution here if it's not Rojas in center and Marsh in left? Because I don't see a scenario where I feel quite comfortable with a platoon that it features one Marsh in center and then a Merrifield Cave or a, you know, Pache Cave type setup in left field. I don't have one scenario that necessarily makes sense to me at all. when it comes to that. The Rojas being in center, or not being in center, Marsh being in center, and Rojas not being on the team.
Yeah, I kind of view this Rojas situation, the way that they're handling it and talking about it, a little bit like the Cam Jurgens situation last year at right guard, where they always say, oh, it's a competition, when in reality, I think they really, really wanted to give Cam Jurgens that job, and they were going to do it as long as he didn't show them that he couldn't do it and he wasn't ready for it. Like, unless he had, like, a horrible camp last season, Cam Jurgens, he was getting that right guard job to start the season. I kind of view it the same way this year with the Phillies, where they're saying all this stuff, oh, if. I think they really, really want Johan Rojas to get the job, and I think they're going to give him that center field job to start the season unless they have a reason not to, like unless he just looks overwhelmed completely in spring training, which I don't necessarily think is going to happen. So I relate those two. What their plan is afterwards, if it doesn't happen, maybe he's viewing it as Rojas is going to be the center fielder at some point this season, whether it is in the first week of April or last week of March, whenever the season starts, or whether it's in June, mid-June, or maybe even like early July or something like that if he needs more AAA at-bats. They want Johan Rojas to be the center fielder, and I think that's their plan this season. So maybe not saying that Whit Merrifield won't be an everyday center fielder is, hey, if Rojas is struggling to start the year, Whit Merrifield's going to be your starting left fielder, and then we bump over Marsh to center field. But that's not for long because Johan Rojas will be the center fielder at some point this season.
Yeah, and I like the Jurgens comparison because ultimately I think that's a pretty spot-on thing where I really don't think there's another option here. Like, the way you went about your offseason doesn't strike me as one where there's a lot of optionality at first. Like, they want Rojas to be their center fielder. I guess they want the reason, obviously, for him to be their center fielder. They want him to, push that to them of like, yeah, of course you are a center fielder. Like, look at the way you performed. But I'm not exactly encouraged by a world where we're already talking about concern in the outfield. The one, like, redeeming quality for what you were thinking about of, like, even if it's not exactly pretty with hitting with Rojas, Marsh, and that combination is that you're at least getting better defense out of the outfield because, everyone remembers what it was like to be subjected to Schwarber last season and left, and everyone, remembers some of the defense that you've had to watch. But I'm just so intrigued by this idea of, like, it not being Rojas and what I would be subjected to then. Because, again, are we in a world where you see multiple cave starts per week?
Well, and that's part of the issue right now, which we've talked about, and some people have chimed in with their concerns with this team. Your outfield right now is Castellanos, who was damn good last year. 5 years, $100 million. We wanted to build him a statue outside of Citizens Bank Park after that series against the Braves, and then 2 weeks later, people are trying to ship him out of here. So Castellanos, still a question mark, though, because of how streaky he was, and, of course, the season he had 2 years ago. But he is your best option out there offensively when it comes to the trio. Then it is Johan Rojas, a dude that performed relatively well towards the second half of the season, but a guy who was a bit fortunate and has yet to prove it over an entire season. How do pitchers adapt to him and adjust to him? And then Brandon Marsh, who, again, is a guy I like and was really good in the postseason last year, but it's a guy that's been in a platoon role for a majority of this season. So their ideal thing right now, their ideal situation is Rojas, Marsh, and Castellanos. There is a ton of question marks there with that trio. And if he doesn't start with Johan Rojas, then you're talking about a Whit Merrifield, who, again, I think I like a lot, maybe even a little bit more than yourself, not over a 162-game season, and then one of Christian Pache or Jake Cave. So it is absolutely a risk to just kind of hand Johan Rojas the job, but they see his glove as an absolute difference maker, which you are well aware of how good he was in the postseason and all of last season. They want that glove in center field. They're going to do all they can to get him out there.
And I believe that. And I believe, like, that to me is, I guess, part of maybe this is, hey, it's why you weren't a high-level, achieving athlete in any regard here is, I'm just sitting here with the thought process of, hey, we know you want this guy to have the job. Why do we keep, playing the song dance of having to, hey, what if he starts the season in AAA? Like, if you want him to have the job, let's just
just give him the job.
I'm ready for him to have the job. That's what it is. And I get it. I understand what they're trying to do, the tactic there. But to me, I get more terrified of how thin the outfield is. And it's part of the issue of being in this competitive window right now. And if you halted your offseason because you weren't sure, you were like, no, yeah, he could be our guy. But we also could go into a world where it's Castellanos, Marsh, and Merrifield Cave platooning until we go out and get another option. Like, of course, I can hear Ricky saying it in my head of this is a July team. Like, they're going to make additions if they need to at the deadline. I could hear the thought process of that, and I understand that to an extent. But if you go into an offseason with okay, we want this guy to be our center fielder. Do you truly believe he'll be your center fielder? Like, you push away a number of options for something that you feel quite uncertain with.
Well, and that's part of my concern with Rojas is we're not talking about their number one prospect in their farm system. We're not talking about this guy coming up who's a top 100 prospect in baseball. He was like their 5th or 6th prospect, I think, last year when he ended up getting called up. And even when he got called up, all of us were thinking, wow, that seems a little premature. What is he, just getting kind of shown for the trade deadline potentially? Like, it wasn't a top prospect that you've been grooming for years that came up here and you knew was going to be a difference maker right away. This is a guy who was more of a middle of the pack type prospect who came up a little bit too early but completely wowed you. Now, maybe he overperforms where his prospect ranking was. A lot of players do that, but that's part of my concern here. It's not like you're putting all your eggs in the basket of Bryson Stott from a couple years ago where he was your top hitting prospect, or Alec Boehm a couple years ago where he was your top hitting prospect. You're putting all your stock in center field in a guy who was middle kind of prospect, who is a difference maker defensively, but a guy who's not necessarily on the same tier of those guys when it came to prospect and how the Phillies and how all of baseball kind of viewed Johan Rojas.
And even, and some of these top-level prospects, you plug them in, it works, it's great, it ends up being great for you. But when I think about, again, the word prospect, the unprovenness, the nature of what his role is with this group, this isn't a team that's, we're hoping they make the leap from 81 and 81 to get into the postseason, and we hope he's a part of that path for us forward. This is a group that, again, mentioned a couple times, and I'm going to stop using the word doorstep probably after today's show because I think I've said it one too many times. But they've been right there. They won a pennant in 2022. They were right there with the opportunity to win it again in 2023. Going with the unproven and fearing the unproven is part of my concern when they keep saying if. It's like that. It's the little insecure mind, like the little anxious voice in the back of my head where it's like, oh, if they're not so certain. Should you be certain about this? It's like, well, this is my starting 9, okay? As uncertain as I am about Rojas, the possibility of it not being Rojas is terrifying me even more than the unknown with him because I feel like I have a known idea of what a Cave Merrifield platoon would look like, and I don't like it.
Do you actually think, because I don't know if it's going to be a true platoon, if it's not Rojas to start, if Rojas
Probably
needs to be it's going to be Merrifield 80% of the time, right. I would think. Where Cave's going to get in there if they're facing a really tough righty or something.
Point,
yeah, Pache maybe thrown in there. But he is making more money than I think Pache and Cave combined times 4. You paid the guy you paid the guy $8 million for a reason. If it's not Rojas, I don't think it's necessarily a Cave Whit Merrifield platoon. I think it's Whit Merrifield's going to be out there 80-90% of the time. If we're facing a tough righty like Strider, then we throw out Jake Cave, which
Oh, yeah.
that doesn't necessarily
That's going to scare Strider
in me, but you get what I'm saying.
Strider's coming back to the bank, terrified of that one. He hasn't gotten enough at the bank over the last couple of years. Jake Cave waiting for him at the bottom of the lineup is going to be the one thing that really, really causes him and his tight pants to get really concerned. Yeah, I get what you're saying. And you're right about that. It probably would be Merrifield more. But again, you brought in Merrifield with the idea of what his role would be, and that's not an everyday guy. And you admitted. Did we have this real quick? While it's sitting there, I'll give you a second here. The whether he's going to that he's not going to have the everyday role, because that you admitted this is probably what his thing is. And again, this was the Merrifield presser yesterday. This was insane what they did, just basically 10, 11 minutes of just straight Whit Merrifield conversation. Oh, by the way, we like our ball club, and yeah, Zach Wheeler and us are in talks, but we're not going to disclose anything to you. It was quite strange with that one. But hey, let's take a listen to the role that Dombrowski thinks Merrifield will play for this team.
Not an everyday role with the ball club anticipated at this time. Like your abilities a great deal. Sure, you'll get in there, but it will be 2-3 days a week, 3-4 days a week. Don't really know that. We want to make sure that you understand what the role would be. And Whit told Rob Thompson that he would be happy to accept the role. He understood what the playing time was, which was great. And Rob Thompson told me afterwards, Harper said, I loved his response. He says, but I'm going to play well enough to show you that I'll get more at-bats.
I hope you do. And it's not that I don't necessarily want you to play well. It's that I don't know if the role for you in terms of the everyday is one that most suits you, because they were very honest about it during the press. Talked to someone in Toronto that was like, yeah, his role by the end of the season was too much. He went from a guy that was hitting over 300 to a guy that finished the season hitting, 272? At quite the slump in the last 30 games of the season. I mentioned earlier the conversation you have, well, he was a good pitcher when he wasn't, or he was a good pitcher until he wasn't, or he was a good pitcher after he wasn't. Well, he was a 300 hitter until he wasn't. Those last 30 games are still a part of his season. So that's part of my hesitancy on this whole Rojas conversation. I don't want to get stuck in that world. Now, Merrifield himself said something that was kind of interesting. I want to open up this in terms of the topic, because Merrifield obviously was an all-star last year. He's been an all-star 3 times in his career. He probably could get that money. He could probably get paid somewhere, certainly get the money, but also get the role. Get the everyday role, get somewhere where he could be guaranteed more playing time. And we talked about it yesterday of just, hey, when you talk about bringing in another outfielder, a lot of them probably are ruled out because they can't guarantee the playing time because of this Rojas situation. Merrifield comes in here, he's accepting his role, and what he wants to do, one, you go crazy for it because you know what the goal is here and what we've talked about all show long about the goal to get to the World Series. But I have a question based off this. Take a listen to what Merrifield had to say about accepting this role and being in Philadelphia.
I've been a 3-time All-Star. I've led the league in hits a couple of times. I've led the league in stolen bases. I've led the league in all these different things that I feel like I've proven that I'm here and I can play. I was an All-Star last year. I've done that. I want to win now. And so I'm here to do whatever I need to do to win and to help this team win, whether it's sit on the bench and be a cheerleader for 162 games. I don't think that's why they brought me here, but if that's what they want me to do, I just want to win.
So he just wants to win. That's great. Love that. Obviously, I don't think you're getting much. The intro presser, always joked that like the intro presser for you, it's a really easy one to win if you just know how to approach it.
Still fires you up though, buddy.
Oh yeah, no, like if you just say, hey, I'm here to win. I'm happy to be here. You feed us a little bit about what you know about the city. You inevitably field the questions that have to do with the city, and you don't sound totally clueless about Philadelphia. You're gonna do well for your first date. The intro presser that fails is a landmark, because it's like that should be the one that should be the home run. You are literally being fed PR. Like, just be good on this one. So he says that, and also a story in the Inquirer that was published yesterday by Alex Coffey talking about Christian Walker. Walker, who's from our area, and there was a question posed. Apparently, Merrifield had asked Walker what it was like playing at CBP in the postseason. Said that, it's what you imagine times 5. So, again, pander to me, make me feel like I am just a part of the ultimate sports city in the world, which we are. But, pander to me a little bit to make me feel good going into a season. I'm curious what we associate with the Phillies becoming such a destination, because there's a lot of factors that go into this. Winning is the biggest of all these. And if you take winning off the table, what goes into building the winning team? Because I remember one of the big things about last offseason was, I forget who was the reporter that said, the insider that said it, players took notice of what it was like to play in Philadelphia for the postseason. It got them all excited. And that, does it play into the mind of Trey Turner? Does it play into the mind of, a Taijuan Walker who signs here last offseason? Does it play into the mind of fill in the blank, Craig Kimbrell who signs here last offseason? Do you start to play into their mind? Is that it? What do you associate most with the Phillies becoming a destination location? Because on top of that, you also have an owner who's willing to spend. And we've seen that considerably. You've mentioned in the updates a lot today, we haven't gotten totally into the fact they offer the most money for Yamamoto. And ultimately, I think location, geography played a big role in that decision, and that's where he ends up in L.A.
And Shohei Ohtani as well.
Yeah, and that's, West Coast. I guess you're at a disadvantage there in that regard because you're on the East Coast, they're on the West Coast. And, okay, that happens. But you have an owner that wants to spend money. That becomes a part of the destination location. What else, like, when you think about what played into it, and I'll ask you this at 610-632-0975, because I have my own answer to this. that plays into all these things, but I think it's a really simple moment, and I like to think that this is not, the scorcher, the controversial answer to this of what plays into it, but ultimately, what do you associate most with the Phillies becoming a destination location and becoming somewhere that players want to go? For so long, and it's just about every sport, we talk about, hey, wouldn't it be cool if guys like ring chased here, or like guys that like want to? And I get it. Getting Whit Merrifield in baseball is not getting the multi-time All-Star in basketball in the buyout market that wants to make something happen. But it's a player that's telling you that wanting to win, and a player that has had the conversation about talking to someone about playing at the ballpark and the environment of it. And we've seen now the Phillies attract player after player to come here. What do you associate most with this becoming a destination location? And I'm curious for your answer at that 610-632-0975. I'm going to get Tom's answer on that. And I have a thought that my association with it goes back a couple of years and goes back to a pretty significant moment. I think we all could maybe guess where I'm going with this. But I'd love to get a dialogue going for people, because I think there's a lot of different answers you could take, and I'd be interested to hear the reasoning behind each one of those. And again, I open that up, invite you into the conversation about that one at 610-632-0975, because Merrifield said it. He's obviously here to win. But to build that winning culture, to build that moment, what is all that built to? Where is all that? Where do you associate that building beginning, and where do you associate this now opportunity they've been given to bring guys in who want to be a part of this? Where does that all go back to? So I'm curious for you to answer that one for me. We'll get into a conversation about that. And, we'll continue on with some of the conversations we've had, reset a little bit about where we've been through the show. And again, take your phone calls at 610-632-0975. I'm Ray Dunn. I'm in for Andrew Salchunas here on the Midday Show right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
Dave Dombrowski.
975thefanatic.com.
Welcome back into the Midday Show here on 97.5 The Fanatic. I'm Ray Dunn, in for Andrew Salchunas. We continue on this Tuesday afternoon. Tom Alvord with me. Got into a couple of different things here, and I teased a little topic coming into this last break, but I want to just reset kind of where we've been throughout the show, because we opened up with talking about this offseason. Dave Dombrowski spoke to the media yesterday, gave a lot on Whit Merrifield and that signing, a little bit on just about everything else, and I mean a little bit on just about everything else, saying at this point they're not actively pursuing anything else. They're not actively pursuing anything else out there. So operate under the assumption today that they're done. Now, of course, if something falls into their lap, this is the Phillies we're talking about. This is John Middleton. This is Dave Dombrowski. This is a team in a championship window. That could change. But if for today's exercise, we take them at the word that they're not actively pursuing something else and they will run into the season with this roster, I'm curious for you out there at 610-632-0975 if you think this has been enough, if this offseason was enough for you. Because ultimately, I don't think anyone sits there and says this was some sexy, game-changing, crazy offseason where it's, oh, wow, look at what they did. They brought back Aaron Nola, which for a portion of you is, a source of frustration for a while. Or for some of you in my camp, that was exactly what you wanted. But beyond that, you had pretty calm offseason. Unless you got the David Buchanan jersey back in 2015, the excitement level for you coming out of this offseason might not be one with their moves. For me, it's one more for the fact that I know what they're returning, and I know where they've been the last two seasons. But I asked you if this offseason was enough for you, enough for you to believe that this group, again, is taking that parade. And it was weird, and it was something that I know the best show ever ran the poll on it last week about expectations, and it was something that I know Andrew and I had talked about last week, and we got some interesting responses of, well, yeah, it'd be great to get them back into the NLCS. And it's like, well, wait a second. The expectation here is World Series. I'm not sitting here going with the NLCS or bust, or with the idea that this is a season I want to end, that if it ends there, it's cool. And I think that's part of, honestly, my intrigue on where people are at on whether or not this offseason was enough, because I think so. I think it was. I look at this group. I look at the fact that we continue to say they choked. That's continuing to have the phrase of they choked. They were the better team in the NLCS. And yes, it was a Diamondbacks team that had won 84 games. Of course, they were the better team in the NLCS. But ultimately, two teams were left in the NL. And when it came down to the last two teams in the NL the last two seasons, you can make the argument both times they were the better team. One time they got done, one time they didn't. In the NL, the Dodgers had the banner off season. But ultimately, still have to love the Phillies' chances to compete in this league. And, oh, by the way, for all you that are caught up in what the regular season is, and, oh, you don't accept that this team is just built for the postseason, you want to see something in the regular season, you're going to get the healthy Bryce Harper coming into the season that you didn't have a season ago. Tom made the joke earlier, even year for Aaron Nola. For as many guys as we're concerned about regression, there are enough guys who we have candidates for actually progressing from what you got from a season ago, where, the expectations should still be a 90-plus win ball club. The expectation should still be one that's built for the postseason, that is enough to go compete. And again, enough in this offseason, because when we mentioned, what are they going to do with the arms? They have enough at that back end. Still have deadline. And that also, I teased this little thing. You sent me something, Tom. And it was the idea that they might be done this offseason, but are they done this offseason to save a little bit of firepower for later? You saw this earlier today.
Yes.
And it was the idea that, hey, maybe this group isn't so much done like they're done right now, but they could be done right now with the thought process of something big later on, which I know if Jay in Trenton is still listening, I think he has his mind set on what's going to happen to the trade deadline. A lot of people around this area, regardless of how many times we could try and douse the flames of that one, where there's smoke, there's fire, and for a lot of people, that fire's burning to get Mike Trout.
Yeah, so it was on, I saw this on Twitter from Phillies Home Run Tracker. It's out of an article. I don't know what article I'm going to find that out. I'm assuming it's Scott Lauber's in the Inquirer, but I will find that out. And it's a quote from an article that says, quote, "What Dave decided we'd do, and I agreed with him, is save the powder," Middleton said. He said, "If you don't spend it now, you could always spend it in July and maybe make a better, more aggressive trade, and you've got money to pay for it." So just because they're not doing something now doesn't mean they're not thinking about doing something come July. Again, I will find out where that is from, but that I saw it on Twitter.
Yeah, it was from the Scott Lauber. I just went through the Scott Lauber article as you were going through that. Yeah, so, okay.
Not the worst thing I've ever heard in my life.
No, I know you're still concerned because of what the trade deadline has become versus what it was. But all right. That's part of the enough this offseason. I think they have done enough. And that was, again, it's not necessarily the sexy thing to say run it back with a team that didn't get to the World Series, that took a step back in terms of the finished product from a season ago. But ultimately, I look at this group and I say, yeah, this is one that I could see on a parade float.
Well, and that's encouraging, and that's why I'm not, even though I do have my concerns, it's why I still feel good about this team, because you hear or read something like that from John Middleton that says basically, hey, you never know, save some of these assets potentially to make a bigger move in July. And it's knowing that they were all in on Yoshi Yamamoto, as I've mentioned a couple times, and you just mentioned, where if you didn't hear it, the Phillies, according to Scott Lauber, offered more money than any other team in baseball, including the Dodgers, to try and get Yamamoto here in Philadelphia. He just ultimately wanted to play with Shohei Ohtani and be closer to home on the West Coast. They've also been in on Jordan Hicks, who just signed to be a starter somewhere, and then a reliever, Robert Stevenson, who only chose the West Coast because he wanted to be closer to home. So they've been in on guys. Dombrowski has tried to make this team even better than it already is. He hasn't succeeded. Sometimes that's just a little bit of bad luck. I say it all the time. I think Howie Roseman has had some good luck with the way he's also done a very good job at building this team. He's had a little bit of luck in building the Philadelphia Eagles when you think about them being linked to names like Calvin Ridley and Allen Robinson, and then A.J. Brown falls in their lap, or being linked to guys like Russell Wilson or Zach Wilson, and Jalen Hurts ends up having the type of season he did 2 years ago and signs that big contract. Phillies just haven't had a ton of luck this offseason, but they've been involved in a lot of these big-name players, which means they are not satisfied with the team currently constructed. They are always looking to get better. So whether that means they're going to go out and sign Jordan Montgomery tomorrow or trade for Mike Trout in July, they are always going to do all they can to at least try and make this team as good as possible.
The idea, and it's so funny when you mentioned luck with this, because, ultimately we get judged on the good, the bad, and that's pretty much the way people think about their sports figures and their moments. We realize a lot of times without actually realizing just how lucky, we have to be to enjoy something, how lucky you have to be to enjoy something. And that's why it's almost part of the reason why this can exist. Oh, can you believe that this team got eliminated? You didn't even have to face that team. That, the Mickey Mouse ring, or the fact that this player got hurt and you ended up winning because that player got hurt. That wasn't even a real championship. You can use almost anything to discredit something as luck. And I think you're right. Luck has played a factor into both Howie Roseman, the good offseason, and luck has played a factor into, for people, an underwhelming. An offseason that, again, when I use the word underwhelming, I'm not necessarily sitting here telling you I'm like, wow, this another Phillies season. No, I'm fired up for this season. I'm telling you that even though I don't think that the offseason for people rung home as this really exciting, sexy thing, you're still right there. And I think we got that. I mentioned that poll from the best show ever. I went and pulled it up to get the final results of it to make sure I didn't speak out of turn on it that they had from last week. And expectation is World Series. It was weird that we got that sentiment from a few people. Yeah, they get back to the NLCS. It's no, it's not about just getting back to the NLCS, man. It's about winning one. I'm not going to be satisfied. We can't just put, the kids' gloves on the Phillies of just get back to the NLCS while we, hold the other teams in town to the idea of they got to go win a championship. That to me, that that sentiment we got for it was like a half hour to an hour last week that really made me a little uneasy with some people.
Yeah, I don't necessarily understand that. I think every situation's different. Like, after the Eagles won the Super Bowl in 2017, did all of us want them to win the Super Bowl the next season in 2018? Absolutely. But were your expectations, would you be unsatisfied? Obviously, we're always unsatisfied when they don't win the Super Bowl, but would you be that much more unsatisfied if they didn't win the next year? Or do you realize, hey, it's really hard to win back-to-back years. It's only happened so often. It's different with this Phillies team. They've gotten there. We've gotten close enough. We know this team on paper is good enough to go back. I'm not sad. And we also know, or at least I think a lot of us know, that this window maybe is a little bit smaller than some of us realize out there, where a lot of your players here and star players are all in their early 30s. And how are you going to look 3 years from now when you were in your mid-30s? It's a whole lot of Whit Merrifields potentially, who's a good player, but how are they going to look a few years from now? No, there's no NLCS. Will we have great times? Will we enjoy it? Absolutely. Last season was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, it didn't end that way, and you're left wanting more. It will be fun if they don't win the World Series this upcoming year, but the goal is absolutely World Series or bust. You have to win it.
That's like the ultimate out of context of something we could rip from you. It'll be fun if they don't win the World Series and just turn everyone against you.
I did not say that exact phrase.
We're putting that one in digital content. That's going to be the headline title for that one. I'm writing that.
Man, I can have fun when the Phillies won 80 games and 70 games back 8 years ago. I can find some fun in a season where they get to the NLCS and lose it. Again, that's not what I'm saying, though. You're obviously going to enjoy a 162-game baseball season plus playoffs. The goal here is the World Series and to win it, and nothing short of that.
Tom Alford's going to enjoy a team that wins 7 games. He just said it. That's what he said. He wants them to go back to the 2015. He saw David Buchanan, and he said, sign me up for 2015 all over again. That's exactly what you were saying. I got it. Yeah, no, good. Good on that one. Now, I mentioned winning and what has kind of made this place a destination. And that was something I wanted to get into off the Whit Merrifield comments, because there's so much that – and we tend to pat ourselves on the back sometimes with the, hey, look at how great our fans. If you just come here, understand us, understand our passion – you'll love it here, you'll be beloved here, and it'll all work out for you. And that part of that is true. And part of that, part of the owner spending money, Middleton offering more money to a guy than someone else is a big piece of why someone may come here. And that could be a reason that you fostered such an environment and a destination for people. But is there any other answer to what has made this place a destination than just simply the decision that Harper made?
I mean, so much goes into it. Obviously, the fan base that we have here, the home field advantage that we do in the playoffs, obviously having a GM that has won in this league before and is willing to go out there and make big-time moves, as we just mentioned, having an owner that was willing to spend money and says, we want our bleeping trophy back, and saying a quote, paraphrasing, but basically, people don't remember how much money you made or
right.
saving. They just care about championships. I want to win championships. All of that is the reason why this place has become a destination. All of that is linked to, however, Bryce Harper. He has his fingerprints on all of those things. Since Bryce Harper has been here, he wasn't satisfied with just Kyle Schwarber. No, he's he's hinting to John Middleton, listen, we need to do more. That's why they go and get Kyle Schwarber. No, that team wasn't good enough. We have to go get Trey Turner. No, this team isn't good enough. We have to re-sign JT Realmuto. And it's also what he's done in the postseason that has given us some of these great home field advantages. And it's also him being in Dombrowski's ear constantly and just hey, listen, we got to do this, the other. Everything is involved in that. The guy that has his fingerprints all over it is Bryce Harper. So to answer the question, yes, but no.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. When you try it, because, when we talk about, placing out blame, placing out credit for different things, there's always a pie chart of it. You get percentage, it's never, as much as we want to blame one thing and we try and find this whole thing, who's most to blame, who's most this, who's most that. In terms of what has made this place a destination, in this run that has brought, the success of this team, is there one thing that is more to the credit of what they've done here than the decision that Harper made to come here? Because we look back on it and where baseball was at and where this, team was at when he gets here versus where we're at now, it seems like that's the motion that everything was set in.
I think the biggest fact, the biggest is Harper, I believe. But I think the guy who's second, the person that is the reason that this is happening, it's John Middleton, because Harper can say all these things. Harper can say, listen, you have to sign this guy. You have to sign this guy. We need to get better. We're not good enough, this, that, the other. And the owner can be like, what are you talking about? We're not good enough. I have a top 5 payroll in baseball. I just paid you $330 million. We have a Zach Wheeler who's making $100+ million. We see bad ownership all around sports, not just baseball, all around sports. Your star can only do so much for you. Your owner has to be the one that puts that plan together and be willing to spend his money. Now, look, he's going to be making a good amount of money with all those season tickets that are going to be sold in all those playoff games. But if the owner doesn't have John Middleton's mindset, it's tough to say, back, John Middleton's mindset, then there's only so much a star in Bryce Harper can do. So Harper has his fingerprints all over this. The guy that makes this engine run is John Middleton, because he's the one cutting the checks. He's the one going into luxury tax. He's the one paying his money for this to happen.
So the quote that you were going for, and this is from
You did find it.
From an Inquirer story from after I believe they signed Trey Turner. My goal is that we create a team that 100 years from now, when people ask the question, what are the greatest teams in the history of baseball, the Phillies are in the conversation. How much money did the 27 Yankees make, or the 29 A's, or the 75-76 Big Red Machine? Does anybody know? Does anybody care? Nobody knows or cares whether any of them made any money or not. If your ambition is to be good, you don't make those decisions. And then talking about Turner, if your ambition is to be great, you make those decisions. It's about desire, really. I just want to win. And then he also went on at some point to say, nobody cares whether I make money or not. If my legacy is that I didn't lose any money owning a baseball team on an annual operating basis, that's a pretty sad legacy. It's about putting trophies in the cases.
Realistically, billionaire. These are billionaires that are owning these teams. Why does every single billionaire not have that mindset? It's true, but a lot of them in baseball and a lot of them in sports do not. You want your owner to have that mindset when he is a billionaire putting out these, especially in a game like baseball where there's no salary cap, where you can spend as much money as you want. The fact that you have an owner here in Philadelphia that has that mindset in a game that is without a salary cap, you are at a huge advantage, and then put along with all the great postseason moments we have and what Bryce Harper says about the city and Trey Turner being here and JT being here. But the big thing is John Middleton having that mindset as an owner when so many owners out there do not.
So it's funny. I mentioned how, these conversations are cyclical and we end up in these cycles, news cycle, sports talk cycle as well. Do you want to know when that was said?
It was after the Turner signing?
Mm-hmm. This was something that was said, at some point in that early spring training time.
Today is February 20th, 2024. Was it February 20th, 2023?
February 17th, 2023.
Right around this time.
In an article that was written by Scott Lauber in his wide-ranging conversation with John Middleton. So it was literally last year's version of this year's conversation where, this is the thing that, when they have a conversation, this is what he wants to portray, this is what he wants to say. And I don't think portray is the wrong word because he's absolutely going about doing it. I can't say that he's not doing that with the payroll they have. I just think that talent that they've brought in, Wheeler, that predates. Nola, homegrown. Start to go down the line, the number of guys that are here because Harper has really, taken this to another level. And again, part of it is, you want to talk about luck. The way everything breaks out where Schwarber and Castellanos, that offseason, the way that offseason breaks out because, of everything going on in baseball at that time, everything going worldwide, you ended up with a little bit of luck to end up with both of them in that time. But tell me they're signing up here for a team that doesn't have Bryce Harper. Tell me they're signing up for a team that doesn't have JT. Tell me Trey Turner's not here because you have Bryce Harper.
Sure.
Ultimately, I keep going back to that decision. And there's still more for Harper to do. I think sometimes we, because he chose us, we sometimes, when I talk about putting the kids' gloves on, we sometimes forget that, he has flaws too. He's part of the reason why they lost last year too. But ultimately, when I look back at what has made this a destination, I go to that decision. Now, it helps that Middleton was going to cut that check. But if Middleton cut that check to someone else.
Manny Machado, maybe. Not saying Machado's not a great player, but.
No, not saying he's not a great player, but also, and the Padres went and they built that team. Right now, the Padres are in a different situation than the Phillies are, and that to me, it's not. Is Machado the problem there? No, it's more Harper has been able to foster an environment. Now, you mentioned the leadership of Hoskins, having him in the locker room. How much does that mean? I guess we'll see if there's anything that plays off that. I think at this point, Harper has put together a group that feels comfortable around one another and has been able, you see the fun they have around each other when things go well. Can they keep the good times going? I think the part of the reason we've had the good times and the driving force of this place becoming a destination has been him.
Well, and the big thing, and I say that Middleton's number 2, but Harper's number 1, which might sound crazy because he's the one paying all these guys. You can pay whoever you want, but if they're not out there performing and performing at the biggest moments, then what is that money being really being spent for? Like Bryce Harper, it's the reason his fingerprints are all over this is because your team follows what the leader is doing. When Bryce Harper has the success that he has in the playoffs, and when he has, literally Rhys Hoskins said it himself.
We ain't losing.
That's what Harper said to him. We ain't losing. And that just, at that time, calmed everybody down in that locker room. Our guy, the leader of this team, the best player on this team, knows we are going to win and knows he is going to perform. After he hit the home run in whatever game it was to get to Game 5, I think, to get to the World Series, he said, yeah, it was cool and all. I wish it happened in the World Series. After he won NLCS MVP, yeah, I don't really care about it. Paraphrasing. I don't really care about this. I want to win World Series MVP. Like when your leader does that, when your leader can not only say these things and bring these players in, but also perform at the highest level, that does so much for everyone around the clubhouse. It does so much more for Trey Turner. And again, it didn't happen the last 2 games of the season last year. I understand that. But if it happens more times than not, good things are going to happen for your ball club.
Yeah, and that's kind of the genesis of this question, I guess, for people is more what you think the driving force. There's a lot of credit you could put around there, but what do you associate most with this becoming the destination location? Because that, to me, has been the decision that Harper made to come here is the first thing that comes to my mind. And I think you bring up Middleton. I think there's people out there that legitimately think it's the fans. Like, I think there is a group, a segment of fans that believe, no. We bring, and that's, I can't go with the fans because I think Harper saw early in his career the passion of people going down to D.C. and when it was CBP South, and, people point to that, Jason Worth was an inside agent, so maybe that was it. Like, I don't, like, there, you could start to really play with some funny scenarios here of what it would be. I don't actually mean that, but, with the fans thing, I think the fans, some would give us credit for that. I would not. I would give it to the Harper. That's what I associate most. I think the environment that we put together in the postseason has certainly helped in some of those conversations. Again, the Alex Coffey story with Whit Merrifield of, Christian Walker saying to Whit Merrifield, hey, man, yeah, it was crazy. It was insane there. I think that helps in the conversation. You get a part of the credit, but if I have to give out the biggest slice of the pie, to me, that one comes back to Bryce Harper. And that's just something that as we talk about how they've built this team and where they're going with this team, something I keep coming back to, that thought process of where to associate the good times, the destination location, because we always talk about wanting to be the destination, and for good reason. I mean, right now, not a lot of clubs over the last 2 years can say they've gotten to as far and created. Again, I feel like I'm Daryl Morey speaking last offseason about the 76ers. A lot of teams would trade places with us right now. A lot of clubs, baseball clubs, would trade places with the success the Phillies have had. All right, 2 things to get going here, and both of them basketball-wise. There's something that I saw today, and I saw during this show that happened today, that I just want to play for you because I want to have a little fun with it in our last segment. Don't worry, Tom. It's in there. It's taken care of. Former 76er who has launched quite the media career and is actually replacing the guy he's talking about in the clip, said some things today that are just funny. Like, I enjoyed it. I'm going to be honest with you. We're playing it. This is a little bit of enjoyment for me. It's about a former 76er coach, if that helps. And I think you might know where I'm going with this. So we're going to play that. We're going to have some fun with that. And we talked about Tyrese Maxey, taking him out of that conversation, and the Sixer you need to see step up the most without Embiid the rest of the way. I also want to do a little positive spin on this. I want to little lighten the mood to close out our Tuesday here, because when we're talking about the Sixers so much is what's going to happen, anxious over Embiid, can they keep themselves afloat? we're at the break. When you're given a chance to break here, you can give an opportunity to reflect on everything that happened leading up to the break. I want you to think about the thing that stuck out to you. Max getting his first All-Star nod is great. Embiid, the 70-point performance, the fact that he was the favorite for MVP before the injury, those are great. But looking at the positivity of what was something that stuck out to you, the unexpected surprise, the thing that you enjoyed the most from the non-Maxey, the non-Embiid early portion of the season, because we were all talking about, wow, this team's got a fun feel to it. This is an unexpected joy. I want to get back to a little bit of that. And what was the thing from before the break that you enjoyed the most outside of the two stars on this team, and what you enjoyed the most from this group? And you can jump in with us at 610-632-0975. I'm Ray Dunn in for Andrew Salchunas here on the Midday Show right here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Well, welcome back in 97.5 The Fanatic, the midday show here. I'm Ray Dunn, in for Andrew Salchunas here. We continue on into your 1 o'clock hour. Best show ever coming your way at 2 o'clock. Tyrone Johnson, Ricky Patalico, and Jen Scordo. Get you through the afternoon drive here as we got a couple more things we want to get into, of course, before we get out of here at the end of the hour here, leading again up until 2 o'clock. We want to let you know that the 1 o'clock hour is brought to you by Ferguson HVAC Lyon Conklin. Attention HVAC contractors for equipment, parts, and supplies for every heating and cooling job. Visit one of Ferguson's counter locations in Bensalem, King of Prussia, Pennsauken, or Westchester. We teased a couple things, both basketball related, coming out of this break. And the first one just made me laugh. It's one of those things that it's something that we're going to continue to talk about as we continue on throughout the rest of this NBA season. And honestly, I'm hoping for quite a bit longer because I think it really hampers one of the other contenders in this Eastern Conference. And it's great to see. I'm thoroughly enjoying every bit of it. I'm going to enjoy, no matter what happens with the Sixers, watching the Bucks throughout the entire postseason and everything that happens with Doc Rivers. So we're going to get to that. We'll get to the audio that we got. We've gotten into a considerable amount of Phillies conversation. Of course, we also talked a little Eagles, and if you missed earlier on some of the things we got into here, of course, the Phillies talked about whether they did enough in this offseason, where the biggest concern lies with this Phillies team. With the Eagles, the offseason talk of, okay, 3 guys that we would all consider candidates to get their extension. Hassan Reddick, it's my priority to figure that one out, make sure that that one gets done. But kind of got into a back and forth, Tom and I, of whether your first priority would be ironing out that Reddick extension or ironing out that Devontae Smith extension. We both want both to happen, but if you had to pick the priority of one of the two, what that would be, and then got back into some more Phillies looking at, just what the deal is when they continue to talk about Johan Rojas and AAA and what the alternative would be to that. But to get you to where we want to go, the Sixers conversation we had earlier, outside of Maxey, who needs to step up the most in this time without Embiid? I felt like our final hour of the show yesterday was a little too tough on Tyrese, especially when we consider we let Tobias Harris off the hook. And both of us, both Tom and I, sitting here talking about who we need to step up in this time without him, I've kind of put the apathetic view of what we're going to get from Tobias Harris of like, okay, we think he's going to be who he is. That's just it. That's what we're expecting. When we're asking for someone to step up, we need him to, but we're not expecting him to do it. So where else can we get that production? Tom thinks Buddy Hield is the non-Maxey guy. And I just need to see, again, I saw more consistency out of the 4 games leading into the break from Paul Reed, but that's what you're going to need. You were paid to be the backup center here. Obviously, not paid to be the starting center, but being Joel Embiid's backup means for an extended period of time you had to believe you're going to be available. Now, obviously, he's been called into more action than you would anticipate, than you would hope going into the season. But unfortunately, it's the reality of his situation. The reality of his contract is they need to get out of the first round, too, for him to get that money. So something that we're looking for there. We're going to get into a little bit of a positive look in the Sixers, but I do want to play this for you. So J.J. Redick is back on First Take. And I know we've said it before in the show. First Take happens like during the beginning of the show, so we hardly have anything from it. But this one was going all over my timeline. And they're talking about the Bucks, talking about what's happening with them as I think they're 3-7 over their last 10. It's been tough for Doc Rivers. This is the challenge of his life. You know, it's just so difficult.
Wouldn't wish it on anybody.
Wouldn't wish it on anybody. He took over the Charlotte Hornets at midway through the season, and they told him he had to win an NBA Oh, wait. You're telling me he took over a 30-13 team with Giannis and Dame? Oh, yeah. Okay. That's my bad. Sorry. I must have had the storyline mixed up there. So Doc is being put through the burden of his lifetime. And also the quote from over the weekend, him saying that he wanted to take over after the All-Star break. Now, if the checks could clear first, that'd be great. But I don't really want to start work. It's like when you start the new job. It's like, do you have any vacations planned? Doc was like, yeah, I got like 6. I got 3 or 4 weeks of vacation planned like right now. I can't really start until about a month and a half from now. Is that okay? Yeah. No, man, we need to keep competing now, which, by the way, they've sunk in the standings under Doc Rivers. But Doc Rivers has, at least one critic, and a pretty loud one in J.J. Redick today talking on First Take.
I've seen the trend now. I've seen the trend for years.
What's the trend?
The trend is always making excuses. Doc, we get it. Taking over a team in the middle of the season is hard. It's hard. We get it. Just like getting traded in the middle of the season is hard for a player. We get it. But it's always an excuse. It's always throwing your team under the bus. They lose to Memphis. Oh, it's his players' fault. Memphis was playing G League guys and two-way guys. And then you look at his quotes over the weekend. Now he wants to take credit for the James Harden trade to the Clippers working out. He wants credit for that. There's never accountability with that guy.
Well,
there's never accountability.
You don't know basketball.
So, safe to say, JJ, not a fan on that one. And how long do you think this has been building up? How long do you think this has been bubbling under the surface for?
When did he play for Doc Rivers? Like a decade ago? Decade and a half?
It's been a decade ago he started his career, I believe. He started playing for Doc Rivers. Obviously, didn't start his career.
So a decade ago then.
Yeah. So I think he played 4 years under Doc in L.A. Was it the first year that he's in L.A.? Was that also a Doc? Yeah.
A long time.
It's been a while. Which also, the subplot here, the fact that this is happening on ESPN, J.J. Redick is going to replace Doc Rivers as the top analyst for it. The sports media nerd in me is loving this also in the back and forth of this whole thing of wow, they're ripping on each other. Like he's ripping on someone that, as of a month and a half, 2 months ago, was one in the business with, and now is replacing in the business. But it's so funny to hear him go after this. And it's been the truth of I think ultimately last year, everyone that blamed just Doc Rivers, you're absolutely wrong, in the wrong for that. There was plenty to go around, and Doc definitely earned his share of that blame. But J.J. Redick, so far what we've seen with the Bucks, there has been zero Doc Rivers accountability. He has done this at warp speed. If I didn't know any better, it sounds like he doesn't want to coach the Bucks. I don't understand why he's doing it almost with the way he talks about it. It's got to go do this. Has Doc not accomplished enough? Is there one? I mean, I guess, ultimately want to win a championship. It's another job in the NBA, loves basketball, but it sounds like a guy who has zero interest to be doing what he is doing.
Yeah, it's problematic for the head coach of the Bucks to not really want to coach the Bucks. That's a little bit of a problem there. I would also say the Redick thing, he was kind of linked being interested to head coaching jobs. Do I remember that? I can't remember if that was just a rumor or if he actually said it himself. I thought Redick was a guy that had some sort of interest in wanting a head coaching job. Could part of this also be where there's guys out there, probably hungry young coaches out there or aspiring coaches out there that want to be head coaches in the NBA or get a shot? Not just J.J. Redick, but all sorts of guys, and they continue to see guys like Doc Rivers get jobs when, hey, maybe he doesn't necessarily deserve it based on what was done 20 years ago.
So the rumor was back after Nick Nurse was let go by the Raptors, or they split ways, whatever phrase you want to use with that one, that Redick was to interview for that head coaching gig. So
okay, there you go.
So you think it's not just the anger from a decade ago? It could be a little sour grapes here.
I think it's everything kind of bubbling over. I think it's him complaining about coaching maybe the most talented team or having the most talented duo that you are coaching those two after they're 20 games over 500. I think it's all of the opportunities he has gotten. I think it's him not really and making excuses and seeming like he doesn't really want to be there. I think it's kind of everything in that head coaching job that maybe J.J. Redick was just the cherry on top.
So J.J. Redick, decade ago, didn't like him. We think. I mean, we don't know that. We're just gleaning from the surface here. Upset that he sees Rivers get another job and he's waiting for his shot, which also, not for nothing here, Redick. If you want an opportunity to coach, don't you think there's an opportunity out there for him that's not just no coaching experience to NBA head coach? I understand we try and do this with players all the time. The NBA has tried to do this with players a number of times where it's oh, yeah, no coaching experience, but you're, a player. Let's just throw you out there and see how you do. I don't think that's the way to do it. I would think, hey, maybe, JJ, if you want to do it like an assistant route. Or, go coach at a lower rank and work your way up on this one. Like,
it does have, didn't Steve Kerr just kind of get handed the job? I don't think Steve Kerr had any experience coaching before the Warriors. I don't think. It could be an outlier, but it's happened before.
Listen, I'm not saying that you have to do it, but I think ultimately, if you want the coaching job, sitting here complaining on national television as a part of that would be, I don't know, maybe just
a waste of time, maybe.
Yeah, I guess, well...
Maybe go a G League, like the Blue Coats, maybe coach them first, assistant job like you mentioned. Yeah, that's probably the much more reasonable likely.
The Steve Kerr route would be, at one point he was the executive, he goes back to being a broadcaster, and then he goes into the coaching world. And it's okay.
At least he was an executive, though. That's high. I don't think JJ's done anything like that in a team.
Yeah, so he wants to go straight from the old man to 3 to running that, Come on, JJ.
I hear you.
If that's really part of this, which is, I think, back when that happened, I remember being wow, the Raptors really, you're going to go. It's such a dichotomy of Nick Nurse traveling the entire globe in search of that one opportunity to be a head coach in the NBA, and your next head coach is JJ Redick. It's the resumes, Nick Nurse is still printing off pages of everywhere he's been to give you his resume.
Yeah, started
and
in
JJ
the G
just
League,
walks in. He's you know who I am. Come on. Started overseas. Started everywhere, pretty much. British Basketball League. Dude's been everywhere. Which just this going back to Doc Rivers though. To me, I hope this experience lasts quite long. Him being the coach of the Bucks has to be a long term. I want them to kind of go. Be him being 3-7, they need to improve to 500-ish, where they give the fake sense of security that something's going to happen, and I need them to, because he did get the long-term deal, but I need to make sure that they secure that one. I don't want him to flame out of this. I need him to make sure, because they're paying 3 coaches right now. What's paying another coach after you start paying 3 coaches?
Yeah, just the whole process that the Bucks have taken has been insane to me, where you replace a guy in Budenholzer who has won a championship with you. And I'm not saying he didn't have his flaws. We had conversations about Budenholzer coming over here after Doc got fired, but regardless, if you're going to replace a guy that won a championship, you have to make sure that guy is the correct guy when you are trying to win a championship with Giannis and Damian Lillard. Not only do you fire him after starting the season very, very well.
30-13?
There you go, 30-13. And normally the thing to do would be to bring someone an assistant. Hey, he's the assistant. He's going to take over. He's been with the team. He's been in the locker room all season long. No, you pick up Doc Rivers, a guy who was doing Milwaukee Bucks games on television just a couple weeks prior, and not to mention just bringing in a guy that had no experience with that team, but a guy that has a label on him as not being able to get the job done and maybe not being the most creative coach out there, even though Kendrick Perkins says that he's an offensive genius. The whole situation, and to give him a multi-year contract, which you mentioned, not even kind of give this a test run and see how he does this season and see if things don't completely fall apart. The way the Bucks are handling things, I would not do it myself, and I hope and I'm glad the Sixers did not do it. Time will tell how it ends up, but the whole scenario just seems like such a mess to me.
The Bucks are just 2 games ahead of the Sixers. Now, it would be one of the great springs of my existence. And I'm not even, obviously the postseason, we all started to think about the idea of them playing a second round. If the Philadelphia 76ers, without Joel Embiid, for a month and a half, are able to move past Doc Rivers-led Giannis, Dame, because right now, I'll be honest, the Bucks have always kind of gotten under my nerves. Giannis, I don't know, he just bothers me,
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Was it the ladder stuff last year?
The ladder stuff, sure. I don't know.
Because I've always liked Giannis. I've respected the dude.
I respect the dude. I just, respect him. He just, maybe I do have a little hater too.
Okay. We all do. It's all right.
Yeah. Bothers me a little. Dame was pining for a long time. Guy wanted strictly Miami, got stuck with Milwaukee. It's kind of funny. I'll be honest. And Doc, that trio. If Tyrese Maxey, Buddy Hield, Tobias Harris are able to run past them in the standings, I know we can't. We don't do the regular season celebration, and I would be wrong to do it, especially knowing how this team has failed in the second round, and I would be scared to do it at all. I'm gonna be this could shape up to be one of the great springs of my life. They run past it.
Which it's very possible that it happens. Now, I will say this. We were hating a lot on James Harden in that trade to the Clippers when it first happened. Oh, look at the big mess that this was, and the Clippers have been pretty damn good since then. They got to prove it come playoff time, which is true. But, we'll have to see how it works out. But, yes, for the Sixers to be able to pass Doc Rivers and specifically Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo in the standings without Joel Embiid, that would just be a cherry on top, especially if you're able to beat them in the playoffs, too. That would just be perfect.
Yeah.
Now, the nightmare scenario, which is worse, because we all know the nightmare scenario, where you get to the second round of the playoffs and then are outed by the Milwaukee Bucks and Doc Rivers. Is that worse, or getting to the finals and losing to James Harden and the Los Angeles Clippers?
Oh, it's easily losing the second round.
Yeah?
Doc Rivers. Yeah.
Okay.
Easily.
Losing to the guy that you traded away, that the only reason he didn't want to be here is because of Daryl Morey.
Well, I at least got to the finals, man.
Okay.
You know how long this has been? Losing in the second round to Doc?
Of all the pain we've gone through as Philly fans the last 3 years and longer, but specifically in championship games, if you get to the championship game, finally break through the second round or after the second round, and then lose to the guy that was here last year in the finals.
They lose to
That'd be
Doc
tough.
in the second round, and
It's over.
There's a good chance that I'm buying a one-way ticket to Costa Rica. And
Okay.
I'm just changing my name, growing a beard, and just done. I
Fair enough.
don't know if I can mentally process that one. The best case scenario is probably playing Doc Rivers in the second round, because I'd feel very comfortable in that one. I went through this, talking about it with Tyrone at one point of how sweet it would be. Hey, you fall behind that series too. You're able to
Down 3-1.
work it back. 3-1 scares me a little bit. 3-2, I'll take.
Okay,
I
fair.
can't.
Fair.
Listen. 3-1, he's been prone to blow it, but also listen, I understand what sports city I operate in here. I need a little bit more wiggle room.
That's fair. That's fair.
You tire out Dame all of a sudden. I'd be all for it. I would love to see it. Yeah, you're right about the whole we were celebrating the Harden thing. Yeah, the Harden in the finals. Harden in the finals. See that phrase?
Yeah, good one.
That phrase to me already. I'm like, it's fine. We'll be fine. Well, that's the thing. If we were going down this path, Jokic and the Nuggets versus Harden, the Clippers. Who?
What would hurt more?
Well, no. Who do you want to see get past there? Because then you'd be rooting for the less desirable.
Yeah, that's tough. So you're saying a scenario where it's Final Four, and look, we all know the Sixers got a ways to go here. Final Four, your match, you're in the Eastern Conference Finals, and on the West, it's the Los Angeles Clippers versus the Denver Nuggets. Who are you rooting for in that series? That's tough.
No good answer.
That would be great. Both, that is Adam Silver's dream. Really, his dream's probably Lakers versus Celtics or whatever. But that is a dream for Adam Silver in that scenario, because you either get Joel Embiid versus Nikola Jokic, which I think all of us want to see at some point in our lives, and hopefully we are able to see it in a final scenario, or the storyline of Harden along with Morey playing them in the past as well. I would say I'd rather see the Clippers just because of Denver has done it before, but I don't love either of those scenarios, I'll be honest.
They play the Clippers, and Nico Batum knocks in the game-winning three.
Or Covington comes back. He's missed the entire season, but decides to come back to let. Yeah.
Oh, all right. So we played that JJ clip more for the fun of it, and we kind of evolved into just the fun,
No clue
random
how.
NBA scenarios. Yeah, that's on me. Yeah, I'll wear that one. That was one that my mind started wandering into the imagination. But our guy, Tasty Cake Tom, wants to jump in on the JJ thing. Tasty Cake Tom, how are you?
Hey, Ray. Hey, Tommy. How you doing?
What's going on, Dom?
Doing good.
I just find JJ in particular, right, but just ESPN as a resource for basketball knowledge, I find them all such a bunch of blowhards. I was listening to JJ the other day, and he doesn't attribute to make the league a more defensive league, he wants to play FIBA rules and eliminate defensive 3 seconds. That's his cure to make the NBA more defensively sound. And, I attribute it to effort. I don't know what you guys think. I just don't think now NBA players are that motivated to guard.
They've made it more advantageous for the offense, but ultimately, I think we see the defensive effort. Like, that's part of the reason why, playoff basketball, what's different? Like, I think that's also part of what makes playoff basketball a little bit different with it. I mean, I don't know if that's my reasoning for J.J. Redick being like you said, someone that just kind of espouses. I know if Andrew was here today running the show, I don't know if we would give J.J. Redick the props. It would kind of be like the enemy of my enemy is my friend today, I think, for Andrew, of the conversation, because I know he's not a Redick guy. I think overall, the podcast, sometimes I think he gets carried away with some things he says, but I actually don't mind him as much as I know some other people he gets under their skin.
Stephen A's tough. Stephen A had I think this is a week ago, Ray. Stephen A. And do you know that Mad Dog Russo guy?
Yes.
They launched. So Shaq had said a couple weeks ago that he pondered if the LeBron and Jordan debate is it time to make it a LeBron Jordan Steph debate, and he is Steph done enough in his career to where he is a part of that conversation. I don't know if you heard of that.
No, I didn't hear that debate. And Dom, I appreciate you checking. I appreciate making the phone call. I'm not going down the GOAT debate today. I appreciate Taste Cake Dom checking in. The ESPN, the national conversation on the GOAT debate, that's not one that we need to run through right now, especially where, mid-Sixer season, and they can add Steph to that conversation if they want to. I mean, Steph's the greatest shooter of all time. That's just the nature of it. He's fantastic. He's changed the way basketball is played. The greatness conversation. That one exhausts me, especially because we go. I feel like they go through it every day, and every day they find a new way to take the angle at it.
Yeah, I like that in July.
Yeah,
it's a July topic.
Yeah.
I feel like the fact that it's.
And I don't need to call out other people and say I love Stephen A. I'll be honest. I'm a big Stephen A. guy. I just actually read the memoir.
Crack.
I love him. The theater, the fun. Like, I enjoy watching or listening at least to him, and some of the I think the Stephen A. Smith show now, the podcast, and him answering all the random questions. He knows what he's doing.
That has been funny on Twitter. Yes, I do
He's an
enjoy
incredibly
that.
entertaining guy. Now, you just sent me something. So JJ called out Doc. We got Pat Bev joining in on the fun here.
That is correct.
So Pat Bev tweeting out, "This man Doc actually saved your career, starred you when no one else wanted to, and you retire, go on TV and say that," and added JJ Redick. This is a kind of a battle of two former players looking for the media space right here. This is a battle of the podcast.
Battle of the pods. Yeah.
Can we get a crossover episode here? JJ Redick and Pat Bev. Also, it's so funny. I feel like if I was talking to my 2016-year-old self, or 2015-year-old self, the fact that I'm going to refer to both J.J. Redick and Pat Bev as former 76ers, J.J. Redick and Pat Bev, going back and forth with each other over this, over the fact that former 76er coach Doc Rivers is a
lot of surprises over there.
Wow. Why? Pat Bev, what's the purpose? He plays for Doc.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
that's it.
Look, Pat Bev, he's not shy to put his opinion out there. That's for sure, or call out other teams or players. I appreciate him coming to the defense of Doc Rivers. I'm very curious for the post pod when the Bucks are eventually eliminated. Hopefully in the second round to the Philadelphia 76ers. But I'm curious to get Pat Bev's honest thoughts on Doc Rivers. So I appreciate him coming to his coach's defense at this point, because that's the team, as much as I'm sure he'd love to be in Philly, that's the team that currently employs him. There's a good chance of winning the championship on paper at least. But I'm very excited for that post-pod, post-Bucks elimination pod.
J.J. Redick's going to pull the Stephen A. after the Cowboys loss, but he just has to find his thing with the Bucks. He's coming out with the cigar. The cowboy hat doesn't really make sense.
Antlers or something like that? I don't know. That's what Bucks have, antlers, buddy.
You're right.
Get a pair of fake antlers. What else would it be?
The image came across my mind. I found it funny. I thought what you said was funny. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Okay,
I'm just saying it was funny.
Just making sure.
And I mentioned ending the show on a high note here. And this is the thing that stuck out from the beginning of the season to you, from leading up to the break. Maxey making his first All-Star appearance obviously is a tremendous thing. Joel Embiid And, the fact that basically, would have won back-to-back MVPs if he stays healthy this season. I don't think there's any debating that one. The guy was averaging more points per game than minutes played per game. It was incredible to watch the level of dominance he found. Is there one thing that sticks out to you from this season, from the beginning to the break, that was, the encouraging part, the positive part? Because for a while there, we were all talking, oh, this is so much fun, this is so great. And then, the Sixers timeline took over again for you, and you kind of went down the dark path again. What, to you, was the one thing that stood out for you in the early parts of the season?
The biggest thing to me was the vibes of this team and how quickly it kind of hit the ground running, where this team seems to be very close-knit. This team seems to want to play for each other and enjoys playing for each other. And examples that I have given before, for those that don't know, I produce a lot of the Sixers games here. And after Sixers wins, we have some post-game press conferences. And we've had two that I've had to use the dump button here, which I was not expecting to use after wins this early on in the season. One was for Pat Beverly, the aforementioned Pat Beverly, who said basically this team is a mother bleeper. And then Kelly Oubre, who says shout out to the city of Philadelphia for telling us we ain't bleep when we ain't bleep. So you could just, and like having to experience that, but knowing like the actual meaning of it behind it, where this team, these guys like playing for each other. I know Pat Bev's not here anymore, but this team really enjoys playing for each other, playing with each other, and this team has a pretty good vibe going on right now, and it hit the ground running pretty early on, I believe, not only because of play of Maxey and Joel Embiid, but because Nick Nurse kind of got this thing off the ground running very, very quickly, much quicker than I was expecting.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I like it's vibes when I enjoy the vibes one. I think for me it was how impactful the return actually was for Harden. Because I think we spent so much time talking about, what are they going to get? What are they going to get? What can you get? What can you ask for? What can you, really look for in this one? And we were concerned that it was going to be nothing, and it was going to be something that was not impactful at all. And obviously, we still have to see with the health of Batum what he ends up being in terms of value to what he ends up being for a postseason run. You saw Morris. It was cool to see Morris be a part of the 76ers. Obviously, then he's a part of the deal, and that deal works out for you. That being able to play a role and then be moved on and be a part of that. And Covington and Martin, they're still, I'm not sitting here telling you I'm pining for a lot of Martin minutes. I'm pining for a lot of Covington minutes when it comes to having this team at full strength. But ultimately, you got Batum, a guy who's going to contribute. Marcus Morris, who at the time was contributing for you and ends up being flipped as a part of a deal for a bigger contributor for you going forward. I was pleasantly surprised by the fact that how impactful I felt the return was for a deal that was kind of the looming dark cloud over the start of the season.
Yeah, and obviously time will tell. We'll see how this ends up happening this year and next. But the fact that Morey was, as we all know, was able to get what he got, not only be able to help your team this year when it came to getting guys from James Harden in that trade, guys that have made an impact for this team, specifically Nick Batum, but also to help you in the future where you're not taking on a guy who has a contract signed for 3 years when we know how the CBA is and how much flexibility the Sixers are going to have this offseason. So, Morey gets a lot of hate here. And, again, he hasn't won anything, so I understand it. But that trade, the impact that those guys have had and the flexibility it's given you, I could say it's a bright spot, yeah.
Speaking again, a lot of hate. On the flip side, getting a lot of love. As we go back to this Pat Bev thing in the last minute of this show. Do Philadelphia fans draw the line for, a lot of people upset about Pat Bev leaving. Pat Bev now defending Doc Rivers. Okay, is that our boy?
I saw the Fink. He's already out on Pat Bev. He said that was the line.
I did see that. Now I'm kind of curious because
it might be.
That's fair. It's a fair assessment of that one. We're all heartbroken. But now the guy's defending Doc. He's going back for his coach, but he's defending Doc. Is that our guy?
Whether you like it or not.
I don't like it. I'll be honest. I enjoyed the JJ Redick commentary more. I'll say it. All right, thanks to everyone that called, tweeted, checked in with us. I appreciate it. Coming up next, the best show ever, Tyrone Johnson, Ricky Metallico, and Jen Scordo. I will be back in for Andrew again tomorrow with Tom Alvord. Till then, appreciate you listening. I'm Ray Dunn here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
Merrifield wants a ring. I'm Tom Alvord, and this update is brought to you by Dynavite. Your dog's health begins in the gut. Dynavite is a nutritional supplement created to boost your dog's immune system. You can now try Dynavite for free. Just pay shipping and handling. Visit DINOVITE.com/radio. Yes, the Phillies begin to prep for the 2024 season as they continue the first official week of spring training. New Phillies utility man Whit Merrifield spoke to the media yesterday and gave his reason on why he signed with the Phillies.